They called him a wannabe hero, a nobody construction worker playing Batman in a dirty alley. The internet laughed at Ryan Cole until the CEO of Lang Industries stood before every camera in the city and revealed the truth. The nobody who saved her sister was once the most lethal guardian her family ever had. But 15 years ago, he vanished. Now, with one viral video, his past has found him. And some ghosts don't stay buried. They come back to collect debts written in blood. Stay with me until the very end and drop a comment with your city below. I want to see just how far this story travels across the world. The rain came down like judgment that Thursday night, each drop hammering the cracked pavement of downtown Seattle with the kind of relentless fury that made honest people hurry home and dishonest ones move with purpose through the shadows. The storm drains couldn't keep up, turning every pothole into a reflecting pool that caught the neon signs and streetlights, painting the industrial district in streaks of red and gold that looked almost beautiful if you ignored the rust, the graffiti, and the broken dreams leaking from every boarded-up storefront. Ryan Cole didn't notice beauty anymore. He noticed exits, blind spots, potential threats. 20 years of training had carved those instincts so deep into his brain that he couldn't shut them off, even when he desperately wanted to forget everything his hands had once known how to do. At 36, he looked older, lines etched around his blue eyes from too many sleepless nights, gray threading through the dark stubble on his jaw, shoulders broad but bent with the invisible weight of a past he couldn't outrun and a future that terrified him more than any enemy ever had. His construction boots splashed through puddles as he walked, his right hand gripping his 8-year-old daughter's smaller one, with the careful gentleness of a man who understood exactly how fragile precious things could be. Lucy skipped beside him despite the downpour, her yellow raincoat bright as a sunbeam in the gloom, her auburn curls, so much like her mother's, bouncing with each hop. She was humming something, probably that song from the movie they'd watched last weekend, the one where the princess saves herself and doesn't need a prince. Ryan loved that about her, the way she could find joy in a thunderstorm, the way she still believed the world was fundamentally good. He envied her that innocence. He'd do anything to protect it. "Daddy, you're walking too fast," Lucy said, tugging on his hand. "My legs are shorter than yours, remember?" Ryan slowed immediately, guilt flickering across his features. "Sorry, sweetheart. Just want to get you home and into something dry. You hungry?" "Starving. Can we have pancakes for dinner again?" "Pancakes are a breakfast food, Luce." "Says who? The pancake police?" She grinned up at him with that gap-toothed smile that could break and rebuild his heart in the same instant. "You always say rules are just suggestions if you're smart about it." "I said that about bedtime once, and you're never going to let me forget it, are you?" "Never ever." She squeezed his hand 3 times, their secret code for I love you, and he squeezed back 4 times, I love you more. The late shift at the Riverside construction site had run past 11, which meant Lucy had spent another evening at Mrs. Chen's apartment down the hall, doing homework and eating whatever the elderly woman had cooked. Ryan hated asking for help, hated feeling like he was imposing, but Mrs. Chen insisted she enjoyed the company, and Lucy adored her. Still, every time he picked up his daughter late, he felt like he was failing at the only job that truly mattered. He was a good father. He had to be. It was all he had left of Emma. The thought of his late wife came with its usual companion, a dull ache in his chest that 3 years hadn't dulled. Emma, with her bright laugh and terrible cooking and the way she'd believed so completely in his ability to be something more than a weapon. She'd made him want to be gentle. She'd made him believe he could leave violence behind and build something clean and good. They'd talked about expanding their family, maybe buying a small house with a yard where Lucy could have a dog, somewhere far from the darkness that had defined his 20s. Then a drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon, and all those dreams shattered like safety glass across an intersection. Ryan forced the memory down, locked it in the vault where he kept all the things that could break him if he looked at them too long. He had to stay focused, had to stay present. Lucy needed him whole, not haunted. They were taking their usual shortcut through the warehouse district, a route Ryan had memorized down to every security camera and blind corner. The main streets added 15 minutes to their walk, and the alleys were safe enough if you knew what to watch for. He always knew what to watch for. His hand unconsciously checked his right pocket, fingers brushing the smooth metal of the pen he carried everywhere. A cheap ballpoint with an engraved brass cap, the only gift Emma had ever given him that he hadn't lost or broken. The eagle etched into the metal was worn smooth from years of his thumb rubbing it like a talisman. She'd found it at an estate sale, thought the eagle looked noble. She'd never known what it actually represented, where he'd first received one just like it, or why he'd thrown that original pen into Puget Sound the night he'd decided to become someone new. Some secrets he'd learned were kindnesses. The alley between the old textile factory and the shuttered bottling plant was narrower than most, barely wide enough for a car. The brick walls on either side tagged with layers of spray paint that formed an archaeological record of the neighborhood's slow decline. A dumpster halfway down emitted the sweet, rotten smell of garbage that had been baking in the summer heat before the storm arrived. Water streamed from a broken gutter above, creating a curtain they'd have to walk through. Ryan didn't like alleys where he couldn't see both ends clearly, but he'd used this one a dozen times without incident. Street crime had patterns, rhythms, and this wasn't prime hunting ground for the predators who worked these blocks. But patterns could break. Rhythms could skip a beat. They were maybe 30 feet into the alley when Lucy stopped walking. Her hand went rigid in his, and Ryan's entire nervous system snapped to high alert, not because of any sound or movement, but because Lucy had frozen. His daughter, who chattered through thunderstorms and horror movies and dental appointments, had gone absolutely still. "What's wrong?" His voice stayed calm, but his eyes were already scanning the shadows ahead. "Daddy?" Lucy whispered, and there was something in her voice he'd never heard before. Not quite fear, but a kind of distressed awareness that didn't belong in a child. "That lady needs help." Ryan's gaze followed where Lucy was looking, toward the far end of the alley where the darkness was deepest. It took his eyes a moment to separate the shapes, to see what Lucy, with a child's instinct for recognizing distress, had spotted immediately. 3 figures. 2 standing, 1 pressed against the wall. His vision sharpened, that old combat focus sliding into place like a key turning in a lock he'd promised himself he'd never open again. Details emerged from the gloom. 2 men, both over 6 feet, wearing hoodies despite the heat. Heavy builds, probably 220, 230 each. Aggressive postures. One had his hand on the wall beside the woman's head, boxing her in. The other was checking the alley entrance, the direction Ryan and Lucy had come from, ensuring they weren't interrupted. The woman was young, mid-20s, dark hair plastered to her face by rain and terror. Expensive coat, designer purse clutched to her chest like a shield. Her mouth was open, but she wasn't screaming, either too scared or they'd already threatened what would happen if she did. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the distant streetlight, showing too much white. Ryan recognized that look. He'd seen it on faces in Kosovo, in Pakistan, in the dark places where people like him used to operate before he'd decided killing for righteous causes still meant killing. That was the look of someone who understood they might not survive the next 5 minutes. Every instinct Ryan had spent 3 years suppressing roared to life. The tactical assessment happened automatically, without conscious thought. 2 hostiles, both likely armed. Positioning poor, they were too confident, hadn't secured their 6, focus entirely on the victim. Element of surprise available. Engagement distance, 40 feet, closing. Visibility, low. Collateral concerns? Civilian bystander, Lucy, must be protected first. Secondary concern, victim safety. Tertiary concern, disabling threats without lethal force if possible. The entire analysis took less than a second. "Lucy," he said quietly, his voice dropping into a register she'd never heard, flat, emotionless, the tone of a man whose empathy had been temporarily shuttered so logic and violence could do what they did best. "I need you to walk backwards slowly until you reach the street. Don't run. Don't make noise. When you get there, stay under the streetlight and wait for me. Can you do that?" "But Daddy..." "Lucy." He squeezed her hand once, firm, final. "Do exactly what I just said. Right now." She must have heard something in his voice that overrode her natural inclination to ask questions, because she nodded and started backing away. Ryan waited until she was 10 feet behind him before he started walking forward, his steps measured and quiet despite the puddles. He'd closed half the distance before one of the men noticed him, the one acting as lookout, who'd gotten sloppy, distracted by whatever his partner was saying to their victim. The man's head snapped around, and Ryan saw his hand move to his waistband, Not a professional. A real operator would have cleared his cover garment first, established weapon control before the threat got this close. Amateurs. That was good. Amateurs could be handled with less collateral damage. "Keep walking, old man," the lookout said, his voice rough with the false bravado of someone who'd learned intimidation from movies. He pulled up his hoodie to flash something tucked in his belt. Ryan clocked it as a snub-nosed revolver, probably .38 caliber, hammer visible, which meant it wasn't cocked. "This ain't your business." Ryan kept walking. 20 feet now. The second man, bigger, with a knife visible in his right hand, probably a 6-inch fixed blade, turned away from the woman to assess the new problem. "You deaf? My friend told you to leave." Ryan said nothing. 15 feet. His right hand slipped into his pocket, fingers wrapping around Emma's pen. Cheap metal, but metal nonetheless. Weighted, solid. In the right hands, any object became a weapon. Physics and anatomy didn't care about intent. "Daddy, please help her," Lucy's voice called from the alley entrance, small and scared but brave in that way that made Ryan's chest hurt. She hadn't left. Of course she hadn't. His daughter was too much like her mother, too convinced that good people helped. The man with the gun laughed, an ugly sound. "Daddy? Oh, this is rich. Daddy's gonna play hero in front of his little girl. Hey, Daddy, why don't you teach her a lesson about minding your own—" Ryan moved. 20 years of training condensed into 3 seconds of precisely applied violence. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The economy of motion that made fighting look like dancing if you understood the choreography. Close the distance, control the weapon, disable the threat, move to the next target. Simple, mechanical, brutal. He covered the last 15 feet in 2 strides, closing inside the gunman's reaction time. The revolver was still rising when Ryan's left hand snapped out and caught the man's wrist, thumb pressing into the nerve cluster on the inside of the forearm, fingers wrapping and twisting in a joint lock that forced the gun to point skyward. The man tried to pull the trigger anyway, panicked, stupid, but Ryan was already moving, using the man's own resistance to drive his elbow into the soft tissue just below the rib cage where the diaphragm lived. The air went out of the man in a whoosh, and Ryan felt the resistance in the wrist collapse as the body's attention shifted to the sudden inability to breathe. Ryan stripped the revolver with a simple twist and pull. The gun came free with practiced ease, and he let it clatter to the ground behind him rather than holstering it. Keeping weapons from criminals was good. Touching weapons created forensic evidence. He kicked the gun into the shadows and kept moving because standing still in a fight meant dying. The knife man was faster than his partner, already coming in with a downward slash aimed at Ryan's collarbone. Good targeting. That strike could hit the subclavian artery if it landed. Bad technique. The windup was too big, telegraphed the attack by half a second. Ryan stepped inside the arc of the slash, using his right forearm to block the descending wrist while his left hand shot up with Emma's pen gripped like an ice pick. He stopped 6 inches from the man's throat, the tip of the pen dimpling the skin just above the Adam's apple. The man froze, feeling the pressure, understanding instinctively how little force would be required to transform a writing instrument into something much darker. "Drop it," Ryan said quietly. The knife hit the pavement with a metallic clang. Ryan held the position for another 2 seconds, long enough to make sure the man understood how completely he'd been outmatched, how easily this could have gone differently. Then he swept the man's legs with a simple ankle-behind-ankle trip that sent him sprawling into a puddle. The first man, still gasping for air, tried to get up. Ryan's boot came down on his chest, not hard enough to break ribs, but with enough force to communicate that staying down was the better option. "Gentlemen," Ryan said, his voice still carrying that flat professional courtesy he used to use when interrogating detainees, "you have 2 choices. Choice 1, you leave right now and we all forget this happened. Choice 2, I call the police, they arrest you for assault and attempted robbery, and you spend the next 5 to 10 years learning what it feels like to be the ones backed into corners. I'm good with either choice, but you have 5 seconds to decide." The men scrambled to their feet and ran, their footsteps splashing away into the rain. Ryan let them go. He'd gotten photos of their faces with the tactical camera behind his eyes, the one that never stopped recording threats. But pursuing them meant leaving Lucy and the victim alone. Triage. Always triage. He turned to the woman against the wall. She'd slid down to a sitting position, her back pressed against the brick, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her eyes tracked him with a mixture of terror and confusion, probably wondering if she'd just escaped one predator only to encounter another. Ryan stopped 8 feet away, close enough to help, far enough not to crowd, and raised both hands, palms out. "You're safe," he said, his voice gentling back into something approaching human. "They're gone. Are you hurt?" The woman shook her head, then nodded, then shook it again like she couldn't quite remember how her own body worked. I can't. They were. The words fragmented, shock splintering her ability to construct sentences. "That's normal," Ryan said. "You're in shock. Your brain is trying to process a threat that's past. It's like a car alarm that keeps going off after the danger's gone. You're going to be okay." He'd given this speech before, in a dozen languages, to civilians caught in firefights they never saw coming. The words were rote, but he meant them. "Do you have someone you can call? Someone who can come get you?" The woman fumbled in her purse with shaking hands, pulled out a phone, stared at it like she couldn't remember how it worked. Ryan waited patiently, keeping his distance, his posture open and non-threatening. Behind him, he could hear Lucy's small footsteps approaching. "You saved her, Daddy!" Lucy's voice was full of awe and something else, a kind of fierce pride that made Ryan's stomach twist with guilt. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around his leg, squeezing tight. "You were so fast. Like in the movies, you didn't even get hurt." Ryan's hand came down to rest on his daughter's wet hair, and he felt a tremor in his own fingers that had nothing to do with the rain. That was adrenaline. That was 3 years of pretending he was someone else cracking down the middle. That was the recognition that he'd just shown his 8-year-old daughter exactly what kind of man her father used to be. "I'm okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "We're all okay." But that was a lie, and some part of him knew it. Nothing about this was okay. He'd just demonstrated combat skills that civilian construction workers didn't possess. He'd neutralized 2 armed attackers in front of a witness who was now looking at him like he was something out of a fever dream. And worst of all, Lucy had seen it. Had seen him move with the kind of efficiency that came from muscle memory etched by repetition in dark places. The woman finally managed to unlock her phone. "I need to. My sister. She'll be so worried." Her voice cracked, and tears started streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. "Thank you. God, thank you. They were going to. I thought I was going to." "You don't have to say it," Ryan interrupted gently. "Just call someone. We'll wait until they get here." She nodded and dialed, her hands still shaking so badly she had to try twice. Ryan turned slightly, scanning the alley exits, making sure the 2 men hadn't circled back with reinforcements or found their courage in numbers. But the alley stayed empty except for the rain and the distant sounds of the city. Sirens somewhere, probably unrelated, the hiss of tires on wet pavement, the electrical hum of urban infrastructure. "Sophie? Sophie, I need you to." "No, I'm okay. I'm near the warehouse district, by the old Riverside buildings." The woman's voice stabilized as she heard her sister's response, fear transmuting into relief. "Can you come get me? Please, I don't want to." "Yes?" "Yes. Please hurry." She lowered the phone and looked at Ryan with an expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with a kind of desperate curiosity. "My sister's coming. She'll be here in 10 minutes. Will you stay? I don't want to be alone if they come back." Ryan glanced down at Lucy, who was shivering in her raincoat, then back at the woman. Every instinct told him to leave, to disappear before questions got asked that he couldn't answer. But his daughter was watching, and what kind of lesson would it teach her if her hero father abandoned someone who asked for help? "We'll stay," he said. 10 minutes turned into 8. A black Mercedes sedan with tinted windows pulled into the alley entrance, its headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. The doors opened and a woman emerged from the back seat, tall, elegant, even in her obvious panic, wearing a business suit that probably cost more than Ryan made in a month. She ran to the woman on the ground, Sophie, Ryan's brain supplied, and dropped to her knees in the puddle without seeming to notice or care about the expensive fabric. "Sophie! Oh God, Sophie! Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm calling the police right now. I'm calling..." I'm fine, Ava, I'm fine. He saved me. Sophie pointed at Ryan with a shaking hand. That man, they had a gun and a knife, and I don't even know how to describe what he did. It was like I don't know, like he'd done it 1,000 times. The elegant woman, Ava, looked up at Ryan, and he felt the weight of her scrutiny like a physical thing. She had sharp eyes, the kind that missed nothing, and an intensity that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in any room. Corporate. Powerful. Someone who made decisions that affected hundreds of people without blinking. You saved my sister, she said, her voice thick with emotion barely held in check. How can I thank you? How can I possibly? You can't, Ryan said simply, and you don't need to. I did what anyone should have done. But most people wouldn't have. Ava stood, still studying him with those sharp eyes. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You didn't hesitate. You knew exactly what to do. That's not normal. Ryan felt warning bells go off in his head. This woman was too smart, making connections too fast. I got lucky, he said, his voice deliberately flat. They were amateurs. Sometimes things just work out. Lucky, Ava repeated, and there was something in her tone. Skepticism, maybe, or the beginning of recognition. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Sophie spoke first. Can I at least get your name, please? I need to know who to thank. I need to be able to… Sophie's voice broke again. I need to remember that there are still good people. Ryan hesitated. Names created connections. Connections left trails. But Lucy was squeezing his hand, and there was no good way to refuse without seeming churlish. Ryan Cole, he said finally, but really, you don't owe me anything. Just be more careful, okay? Don't walk alone at night in places like this. Ava was still staring at him, and Ryan saw the exact moment something clicked behind her eyes. A flash of recognition or confusion, he couldn't tell which. Her hand went to her throat in an unconscious gesture, touching what looked like a delicate necklace. Ryan Cole, she repeated slowly. Have we met before? No, Ryan said quickly, too quickly. I've got one of those faces. People always think they know me from somewhere. Daddy, I'm cold, Lucy interjected, and Ryan silently blessed his daughter's timing. Can we go home now? The lady has her sister. She's safe. You're right, sweetheart, Ryan nodded to both women. You should get somewhere warm and dry, and maybe talk to someone, a counselor, a therapist. What happened tonight, it can mess with your head in ways you don't expect. He'd seen it too many times. Civilians who walked away from violence physically intact but psychologically shattered. Take care of each other. He turned to leave, but Ava's voice stopped him. Wait, please. At least let me give you my contact information. If there's ever anything you need, anything at all. I don't need anything, Ryan said, and this time he kept walking, his hand firmly gripping Lucy's, moving toward the alley entrance with measured steps that didn't quite qualify as fleeing, but came close. He could feel Ava's eyes on his back, feel the weight of questions she wanted to ask, and all he wanted was to be gone before those questions found voices. They emerged onto the street where the lights were brighter and the rain seemed less oppressive. Lucy looked up at him with those big eyes that saw too much. Why didn't you want to talk to them more? They seem nice. They are nice, Ryan agreed, but sometimes nice people ask complicated questions and Daddy's tired. Let's just get home, okay? Okay, she paused. Daddy, what you did back there, that was really brave. It was really dangerous, Ryan corrected gently. There's a difference. I don't want you thinking that fighting is good, Luce. I only did it because there wasn't any other choice. But you were amazing. You were like a superhero. Superheroes aren't real, Ryan said, and the words tasted like ash in his mouth. Real people who do dangerous things get hurt or killed. I was just doing what I had to do to keep everyone safe. They walked the rest of the way home in silence, Lucy processing what she'd seen, Ryan trying not to think about the expression on Ava's face, that look of recognition, of questions forming. He told himself it didn't matter. Seattle was a big city. The chances of running into those women again were minimal. By tomorrow, they'd be back to their lives and he'd be back to his. And tonight would fade into just another story Lucy would tell her friends, exaggerated and embellished until it bore no resemblance to reality. He wanted to believe that. He needed to believe that. But 20 years of experience told him something different, told him that moments like tonight were fault lines, fractures in the careful life he'd built. And fractures had a way of spreading. Their apartment building was a 4-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had been up and coming for a decade without ever quite arriving. The lobby door stuck. The elevator hadn't worked in a year, and the hallway on the 3rd floor always smelled like someone was cooking something that involved too much garlic and not enough ventilation. But the rent was manageable. Mrs. Chen was 2 doors down, and Lucy's school was a 10-minute walk. It was home. It was safe, or it had been, until tonight made Ryan remember that safety was an illusion for people like him. He helped Lucy out of her raincoat and shoes, sent her to take a warm bath while he started water for hot chocolate. Their ritual after bad nights, though usually bad nights, meant nightmares about Emma, not watching her father dismantle 2 attackers in an alley. While the water heated, Ryan stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the rain-soaked city, and allowed himself 30 seconds to fall apart. His hands were shaking, not from fear, he'd processed that before the confrontation even started, but from the recognition of how easily he'd slipped back into old patterns. The muscle memory had been right there, waiting. 3 years of construction work, of deliberately choosing the ordinary, of trying to be someone who built things instead of breaking them, and all it had taken was one moment of crisis to reveal how thin that transformation really was. He was a killer pretending to be a carpenter, a weapon wrapped in civilian clothes, and now his daughter had seen the truth. The kettle whistled. Ryan made hot chocolate, the kind from the packet with tiny marshmallows that Lucy loved. He added extra marshmallows tonight. When she emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas, pink with unicorns, faded from too many washes, he was waiting on the couch with her mug and a blanket. She curled up next to him, small and warm and smelling like strawberry shampoo. They sat in silence for a while, sipping chocolate, listening to the rain drum against the window. Ryan waited. Lucy always had questions. She just needed time to figure out which ones to ask first. "Daddy," she said finally, her voice small, "were you scared?" "Yes," he said honestly. "I'm always scared when there's danger around you." "But you didn't look scared. You looked calm." Sometimes being scared is what makes you calm. When you're scared for the right reasons, scared that someone you love might get hurt, that fear makes you focused. It's like your brain knows it can't afford to panic because panicking might mean the people you love get hurt worse. Lucy processed this, her face scrunched up in that way she had when she was thinking hard. Is that what Mom would have wanted? For you to help people even if it's dangerous? The question hit Ryan in the chest like a hammer. Emma. God, Emma would have been so proud and so angry and so scared all at once. She'd loved his protective instincts, had joked that she felt like she had her own personal guardian angel, but she'd also hated what those instincts had cost him, the nightmares he pretended he didn't have, the way he sometimes flinched at loud noises or scanned rooms for exits he'd never need. Your mom, Ryan said slowly, choosing his words with care, believed that good people help when they can. But she also believed that the most important thing was keeping the people you love safe. If she were here, she'd probably yell at me for taking risks and then hug me for doing the right thing. I think you did the right thing, Lucy said firmly. That lady was scared, and you made her safe. That's what good guys do. Yeah, sweetheart, that's what good guys do. But the words felt hollow even as he said them because Ryan knew something Lucy didn't, that the world wasn't divided into good guys and bad guys. It was full of people who'd done terrible things for complicated reasons, and he'd been one of them. The men he'd hurt tonight were predators, yes, but he'd spent years being a predator himself. Just one with better training and official sanction. The line between protector and destroyer was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. They finished their hot chocolate, and Ryan tucked Lucy into bed, reading her 2 chapters of the book they were working through. Something about a girl who discovered she could talk to animals, innocent and magical, and everything he wanted his daughter's world to be. By the time he turned off her light, she was mostly asleep, her breathing deep and even. Ryan closed her door and stood in the hallway, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline crash was hitting, making his bones feel heavy, his thoughts slow and sticky. He should sleep. He had another early shift tomorrow, and his body needed rest. Instead, he went to the shoebox he kept in his closet. It was battered cardboard, originally from a pair of work boots, now held together with packing tape that had yellowed with age. Inside were the fragments of his old life, the pieces he couldn't bring himself to destroy, but couldn't afford to display. A photograph of him and Emma on their wedding day, both of them grinning like idiots, so young and convinced they had time. Lucy's hospital bracelet from when she was born, tiny and pink. A folded flag from Emma's funeral that he'd never quite figured out how to honor properly. And beneath those, wrapped in a soft cloth, something else. Ryan's fingers found it automatically, pulling out the object with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. It was a pen, twin to the one in his pocket, but older, more worn. The brass cap was engraved with a small eagle, its wings spread, its talons gripping a shield. Below the eagle, in letters almost too small to read, were two words: Semper Vigilo, always vigilant. He hadn't looked at this pen in 3 years, hadn't wanted to remember what it represented, the world it came from. But tonight it felt necessary, like touching a talisman to confirm it was still real, that he hadn't imagined the person he used to be. The Lang family had given these pens to every member of their private security detail, a gift from Thomas Lang himself, the patriarch who'd built an empire from timber and shipping and later diversified into everything from tech to real estate. Ryan had earned his pen at 23, fresh from 6 years in military intelligence and another 2 in private contracting, young and arrogant and convinced his skills made him invincible. Thomas Lang had hired him to protect what mattered most, his 2 daughters. Ryan closed his eyes and let the memories come, not the sanitized versions he'd allowed himself over the years, but the real ones, sharp and clear. The Lang estate in the San Juan Islands, 40 acres of forest and shoreline, the kind of place where wealthy people went to pretend they could escape the world. The main house had 17 rooms and more security systems than some military installations. Ryan had designed most of those systems. He'd been chief of the security detail by 25, responsible for everything from threat assessment to background checks on staff to planning evacuation routes in case something went catastrophically wrong. For 7 years, he'd been the shadow in the background, the invisible guardian making sure that Ava and Sophie Lang could live their privileged lives without ever having to think about the people who might want to hurt them for their father's money or influence. He'd been good at it, dangerously good. He'd stopped 3 kidnapping attempts, caught 2 staff members selling information to tabloids, and once identified a long-range surveillance team set up in the woods half a mile from the house before they'd taken a single photograph. Thomas Lang had trusted him completely. The girls had called him Cole, never Ryan, always his last name, maintaining that professional distance even though he'd spent more waking hours with them than their own father had. Ava had been 15 when Ryan started, brilliant and intense even then, already showing the business acumen that would eventually make her a CEO by 30. Sophie had been 10, sweet and shy, and convinced that Ryan was some kind of real-life superhero. He'd left when Ava turned 22 and took a position in her father's company. Sophie was 17, almost ready for college. They didn't need a full-time security detail anymore, not like when they'd been kids. Thomas had offered Ryan a position heading corporate security, but Ryan had declined. He'd met Emma 6 months earlier, a kindergarten teacher with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes and absolutely no connection to his violent past. She'd made him want something different. She'd made him believe he could be someone who created rather than destroyed, so he'd walked away. Changed his phone number, moved to Seattle, and got his contractor's license. Built a new identity from concrete and lumber, and the radical notion that he could be normal. He'd sent one letter to Thomas Lang, thanking him for the opportunity and asking, begging really, that the family not try to find him. It wasn't professional, but Thomas had understood. The pen had arrived a week later with a simple note. You'll always be one of ours. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. Ryan had thrown that original pen in the water, watching it sink as a symbolic severing of ties. He'd kept the note. Now, sitting in his closet with the pen Emma had unknowingly replaced, Ryan wondered if Thomas Lang was still alive. The man had been in his 60s when Ryan left, healthy but not immortal. Ava and Sophie would be in their 30s now. Ava had obviously done well. That car, that suit, the confidence with which she'd moved suggested someone who'd achieved the success she'd always been destined for. And Sophie, who'd been 17 and planning to study art history the last time Ryan had seen her, had almost been raped in an alley tonight. The guilt hit him like a freight train. He'd left. He'd chosen his own happiness over his duty, and tonight Sophie had paid for that choice. If he'd stayed, if he'd been there, she would never have been in danger. She would have had protection, deterrence, the kind of security that meant predators looked elsewhere for victims. But he'd left because he wanted to be with Emma, wanted to be Lucy's father, wanted to be human instead of a weapon. And he'd been happy. For 5 years before Emma died, he'd been genuinely, impossibly happy in a way he'd never imagined was available to people like him. Did that make him selfish? Did Sophie's terror tonight negate those 5 years of ordinary joy? Ryan didn't know. He just knew that sitting here spiraling wouldn't help anyone. He put the pen back in its cloth, buried it under the other mementos, and closed the shoebox. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, Lucy would go to school, and life would continue in its mundane rhythm. Tonight was an anomaly, a statistical blip. The chances of encountering Ava or Sophie again in a city of nearly 1 million people were essentially zero. He repeated that to himself as he finally went to bed, as he stared at the ceiling listening to the rain, as he eventually drifted into uneasy sleep. And he almost believed it, right up until his phone started ringing at 6 a.m., displaying a number he didn't recognize and a Seattle area code. Ryan answered out of habit, his voice rough with sleep. "Hello? Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Jennifer Park from Cairo 7 News. I'm calling regarding a video that's gone viral overnight showing you in an altercation in the warehouse district. We'd love to get your comment for a segment we're running this morning." Ryan hung up, stared at his phone, watched as 3 more calls came in simultaneously. Different area codes, different names lighting up his screen from caller ID. His email notification showed 43 new messages, mostly from addresses he didn't recognize, all with subject lines like interview request and your story and hero construction worker. Viral. Video. His face. His skills. His carefully constructed anonymity, destroyed in a single night. Ryan's hands started shaking again, but this time it had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the cold certainty settling in his gut. The past hadn't just cracked, it had shattered, and the pieces were about to cut everyone he'd been trying to protect. Ryan sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, watching the notifications multiply like bacteria in a petri dish. Calls, texts, emails, all from strangers who somehow knew his name, knew what he'd done, knew where the carefully constructed walls around his life had weak points. He scrolled through his email with numb fingers, each subject line a small detonation. Channel 5 wants your story. Podcast interview opportunity. Speaking engagement request. Book deal inquiry. Book deal. Christ. He opened his browser and typed his own name into the search bar, something he'd trained himself never to do, and watched as the results populated. The first hit was a video with 2.3 million views, posted 7 hours ago by an account called Seattle Street Watch. The thumbnail showed a grainy image of him mid-motion, one hand controlling a man's wrist, the other raised with something metallic glinting in the streetlight. Below it, blue-collar dad destroys 2 thugs in alley. Who is this guy? Ryan's thumb hovered over the play button. He didn't want to watch. Didn't want to see himself through the eyes of strangers, reduced to entertainment. His daughter's terrified voice in the background turned into content for people eating breakfast. But he needed to know what was out there, needed to understand the extent of the damage. He pressed play. The video was shot from the street side of the alley, probably someone's phone camera held at waist level, the angle awkward and shaky. The audio was mostly rain and distant traffic, but Lucy's voice came through clear as a bell. "Daddy, please help her." Then movement in the frame. Ryan walking forward with that deliberate stride, his posture relaxed but purposeful. The person filming had zoomed in, losing some resolution but capturing enough detail to show the confrontation. Ryan watched himself disarm the gunmen with mechanical efficiency, the movements so smooth they almost didn't look real. The comments section was already a war zone. Fake. Nobody moves like that in real life. That's not fake, that's training. Military or private security, guaranteed. Who carries a pen into a fight? This dude is John Wick's cousin, LMAO. Anyone notice the little girl? What kind of father brings his kid to a fight? He protected his kid, you moron. He's a hero. Hero? More like wannabe Batman looking for attention. Probably staged the whole thing. Ryan closed the video, his jaw tight. The comments he could ignore. Anonymous strangers projecting their own narratives didn't matter. But the view count did. 2.3 million people had watched him in the last 7 hours. By tonight, it would be 5 million. By the weekend, who knew? The algorithm would feed it to more and more people. And with each share, each repost, each news segment picking it up for filler content, the circle of exposure would widen. Someone would recognize him. Someone from his old life. Someone who knew what that smooth efficiency meant. Who understood that disarming techniques like that weren't learned in weekend self-defense classes. And if the wrong someone recognized him, if any of the organizations he'd worked against during his years in intelligence decided to investigate, decided he was a loose end that needed tying up, then Lucy would be in danger. Real danger. The kind that didn't come from street thugs with cheap revolvers, but from professionals who made people disappear. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen. He answered immediately. Ryan? Are you watching the news? Her accent made the words tumble together, but her concern was crystal clear. That's you, yes? In the alley? They're saying you're a hero, Mrs. Chen. I need a favor, a big one. Anything, you know this. Can Lucy stay with you today? I need to figure some things out, and I don't want her going to school until I know... He trailed off. Until he knew what? Until he knew if his face being plastered across the internet had triggered any alarms in the darker corners of his past? Until he knew if the life he'd built was salvageable or if he needed to start planning an exit strategy? Of course. She's always welcome. But Ryan, are you in trouble? Should I be worried? No, he lied. Just media attention. You know how it gets. Everyone wants a story, and I don't want Lucy dealing with reporters at her school. Mrs. Chen made a skeptical noise that suggested she didn't entirely believe him but wasn't going to push. I'll make her breakfast. You take care of whatever you need to take care of. And Ryan, what you did was very brave. Don't let anyone tell you different. Ryan thanked her and ended the call, then sat in the silence of his bedroom trying to formulate a plan. Step 1. Keep Lucy safe and out of the spotlight. Step 2. Figure out how bad the exposure actually was. Who'd seen it? Who'd recognized him? Whether any flags had been raised in databases he hoped had forgotten his name. Step 3. Damage control. Maybe give one interview to a legitimate outlet, control the narrative, present himself as a concerned dad who got lucky rather than a trained operator who'd never really left the field. Or maybe step 3 was pack a bag and disappear. Change names, change cities, start over somewhere the internet's memory couldn't reach. He'd done it once before. He could do it again. The thought made his chest tight. Lucy was happy here. She had friends, a school she loved, stability for the first time since Emma died. Running would tear all that away, turn her into a fugitive's daughter, always moving, always looking over her shoulder, never quite sure why her father was so paranoid. That wasn't the childhood he wanted for her. But keeping her safe mattered more than keeping her happy. Ryan stood, moved to his closet, and pulled down the duffel bag he kept on the top shelf. It was already packed. Go bag was the technical term, though he tried not to think in those terms anymore. With cash, fake IDs that were probably expired but might still work, a burner phone, and documents he'd need if life went sideways. He hadn't opened it in 3 years. The zipper stuck briefly before giving way, and inside everything was exactly as he'd left it. $3,000 in various denominations, a passport with his face and someone else's name, emergency contacts written in code on the back of a grocery receipt. He was staring at the contents, trying to decide if today was the day he'd finally need them, when someone knocked on his apartment door. Ryan's entire body tensed. He moved to the living room window and checked the street below. No suspicious vehicles, no obvious surveillance, just the usual morning traffic and a black SUV parked in a loading zone with its hazards on. Expensive. Professional. His hand went automatically to his pocket, fingers wrapping around Emma's pen, before he realized how absurd that was. A pen wouldn't help if someone had come to kill him. Another knock, more insistent. Ryan checked the peephole and felt his stomach drop. Ava Lang stood in his hallway, wearing a different suit than last night, but the same expression of intense focus. Behind her, visible over her shoulder, was a man in a dark jacket with the distinct posture of private security, weight balanced, hands loose, eyes scanning even though they were in a residential hallway. Professional. Very professional. Ryan considered not answering, but that was childish and wouldn't solve anything. If Ava Lang had found his address, she had resources, which meant she'd just come back. Better to deal with it now, control the conversation, figure out what she wanted. He opened the door 6 inches, keeping his body in the gap. Ms. Lang. Mr. Cole. May I come in? I don't think that's a good idea. Ava's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she'd expected the refusal. I understand you value your privacy. I understand that last night was complicated and you'd prefer to be left alone. But I'm not here to intrude. I'm here because I owe you a debt, and because I think we need to talk about what happens next. Nothing happens next. You and your sister are safe. I go back to my life. End of story. Except the story isn't ending, is it? Ava pulled out her phone, turned it to show him the same video he'd watched 10 minutes ago. The internet doesn't forget, Mr. Cole. By tomorrow, every news outlet in the city will be running segments on the mysterious construction worker with combat training. And once they start digging, and they will dig, they're going to find things you've clearly tried to bury. Ryan's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? It's a warning. I employ a very good research team. It took them 4 hours to figure out that Ryan Cole didn't exist before 12 years ago, that your employment history before Seattle is suspiciously sparse, and that you have the kind of operational security most civilians don't even know exists. That means someone else will figure it out too, probably someone with less charitable intentions than mine. What do you want? To help, and to say thank you properly. May I please come in? 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Ryan studied her face, looking for deception or hidden agenda, but saw only sincerity and that same sharp intelligence that had made her dangerous even as a teenager. He stepped back, opening the door wider. 5 minutes. Ava entered, the security guard staying in the hall. She glanced around the apartment, taking in the modest furniture, Lucy's drawings on the refrigerator, the general lived-in mess of a single parent's life. And something in her expression softened. You have a daughter. Lucy, she's 8. The girl from last night, she was very brave. She shouldn't have had to be. Ryan crossed his arms, maintaining distance. You said you wanted to help. Help with what, exactly? Ava moved to the window, looking out at the street below with the unconscious habit of someone who'd spent her life being watched. You saved my sister's life. Sophie is traumatized. She spent all night crying, reliving it, convinced that if you hadn't been there, she'd be dead or worse. My father always taught us that debts must be repaid, especially debts of blood. So I'm offering you resources, legal help if the media becomes intrusive, security if the attention draws unwanted elements, money if you need to relocate and start fresh somewhere else. Whatever you need to protect yourself and your daughter from the consequences of being a good person. I don't want your money. I know. The fact that you don't is precisely why I'm offering. Ava turned to face him. Mr. Cole, I run a company with 3,000 employees and a $7 billion market cap. I solve problems for a living, and right now you have a problem, unwanted attention, that could unravel a life you've clearly worked hard to build. Let me solve it. Ryan was quiet for a moment, processing. The offer was tempting. God knew he could use help managing the media circus. But accepting help from Ava Lang meant exposure, meant letting someone into his life who had the resources to discover everything he'd hidden. It meant risk. Why? He asked finally. Why go to this trouble? You could write a check to charity in my name, call it even, and go back to running your empire. Why show up at my door at 6 in the morning? Ava's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face before the professional mask returned. Because last night, when I saw you in that alley, I recognized you. Not your face. That took me a few hours and some old photos to confirm. But I recognized the way you moved. the way you assessed threats, the way you controlled the situation with minimal force. And I realized that I'd spent 15 years wondering what happened to the man who taught me that being protected meant being free to be brave. Ryan felt the floor tilt beneath him. You remember. Of course I remember. Cole, you were there for 7 years. You taught Sophie and me more about confidence and risk assessment than our actual father did. When you left, we understood. You'd given enough of your life to our family, but we never forgot. And when I saw you last night, recognized who you were, her voice caught slightly. I realized the universe had given me a chance to return the favor, to protect the protector, for once. Ava, Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. That was a different life. I'm not that person anymore. Aren't you? Because what I saw last night looked an awful lot like the man who once disarmed an attacker who'd gotten into our estate by pretending to be a caterer. You moved the exact same way, efficient, controlled, devastating. You can pretend you've left it behind, but muscle memory doesn't lie, and neither does instinct. Ryan wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She was right. Last night had proven that 3 years of deliberate domesticity hadn't erased what he was, only covered it with a thin veneer that crisis could strip away in seconds. You said your research team found gaps in my history, he said finally. What else did they find? Nothing I'm going to share without your permission. Everyone deserves their secrets, Mr. Cole. But others will look, and they won't be as respectful of privacy, especially if this video keeps spreading. Ava pulled a business card from her jacket, set it on the coffee table. I'm not asking you to work for me. I'm not asking you to be someone you've left behind. I'm just asking you to let me help protect the life you've built. That's all. Ryan stared at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, Ava's direct number written in pen on the back. I need to think about it. That's fair, but think quickly. The news cycle moves fast, and once they start digging into your background, the window for controlling the narrative closes. Ava moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you built something good here. Your daughter clearly loves you. You have a life. I'd hate to see that destroyed because you were brave enough to help a stranger. After she left, Ryan stood in his living room holding the business card, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. The smart play was probably to take Ava's help, use her resources to bury the story, redirect attention, maybe give one carefully scripted interview that presented him as exactly what he appeared to be, a dad who got lucky. But working with Ava meant entanglement, meant people from his old life knowing where he was, what name he was using, who he loved. It meant giving up the anonymity that had been his only real protection for 3 years. He was still weighing options when his phone rang again. Different number, different area code. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Is this Ryan Cole? A man's voice, young, eager, the tone of someone who thought they were about to break a big story. Who's asking? Derek Marsh, freelance journalist. I'm working on a piece about last night's incident. I've been making some calls, talking to people in the security industry. And I've got to say, Mr. Cole, your background is fascinating, or rather, the lack of one. See, I've got a source who says there's no record of you before 12 years ago, which is weird, right? Most people leave digital footprints. But you? It's like you appeared out of nowhere. So I'm wondering, is Ryan Cole even your real name? Ryan's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I've also got a source, different source, who says you match the description of a man who used to work private security for some very wealthy families in the Pacific Northwest. Same build, same age, same very particular skill set. Except that guy went by a different name. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you're either in witness protection or you're running from something, or maybe you did something that required starting over. And that's a hell of a story, Mr. Cole. The kind of story that could make a career. I'm a construction worker who helped someone who needed it. That's the whole story. Is it though? Because the way you moved in that video, I showed it to an ex-Marine buddy of mine, and he said that's advanced close quarters combat training, the kind they teach special operations guys, not construction workers. So either you're full of shit about who you are, or someone taught you how to kill people efficiently, and I'm betting the public would be very interested to know which one. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. You print speculation like that, you'll get sued. Maybe. Or maybe I'll win a journalism award for exposing a story the mainstream media missed. Either way, it'll get attention. And attention is currency in this business. Marsh paused. Unless, of course, you want to go on record. Tell your side of the story. I'm willing to listen. Could even be sympathetic in how I frame it if you give me something good. I have nothing to say to you. That's disappointing. Guess I'll just have to work with what I've got. Should be enough. Oh, and Mr. Cole? You might want to keep your daughter home from school today. Once this story breaks, she's going to have reporters following her around, asking questions about her mysterious daddy. Kids that age, they don't always know what not to say. Would be a shame if she accidentally revealed something you've worked hard to hide. The line went dead. Ryan stood frozen, the implied threat hanging in the air like smoke. This journalist, this parasitic fucking vulture, had just threatened his daughter. Had just made Lucy a target in whatever story he was constructing, using her as leverage to force Ryan into cooperation. The rage that flooded through him was white-hot and familiar, the kind of anger that had once made him very good at hurting people who deserved it. His hand was shaking again, but this time with the effort of not throwing his phone through the wall. He wanted to find Derek Marsh and have a very direct conversation about what happened to people who threatened children. Wanted to make the man understand, in terms both physical and psychological, why using an 8-year-old girl as a pawn was the worst mistake of his parasitic little life. But that was the old Ryan, the one who solved problems with intimidation and violence, the one who knew how to make people disappear without leaving traces. That Ryan would get Lucy taken away by child services and land him in prison. He called Ava Lang. She answered on the first ring. That was faster than I expected. I need your help, now. There's a journalist digging into my background and he just threatened my daughter. Name. Derek Marsh, freelance. I don't have more than that. Give me 10 minutes. The line went dead. Ryan paced his apartment, adrenaline singing through his veins, every protective instinct screaming at him to grab Lucy and run. But running without a plan was panic, and panic got people killed. He forced himself to breathe, to think tactically. If Marsh had sources talking about his past, then other people were making connections too. The video had triggered something. Someone had recognized him, or recognized the skill level, and started asking questions, which meant the careful walls he'd built around his identity were already crumbling. His phone buzzed. Ava. He answered. Derek Marsh, 32, based in Portland, works primarily for alternative news websites and conspiracy blogs. Resume includes 3 defamation lawsuits, 2 of which he lost. Reputation in the industry as bottom feeder who sacrifices accuracy for clicks. Ava's voice was crisp, businesslike. I've had my legal team send him a cease and desist regarding your daughter. If he publishes anything that includes her name, photo, or school, we'll sue him into bankruptcy. The letter makes that very clear. That won't stop him from writing about me. No, but it protects Lucy, which is the priority. As for the rest, I've also contacted the editors at the 3 publications he regularly writes for and explained that any story based on speculation and anonymous sources about a private citizen who helped stop a crime will be met with immediate legal action. Most of them don't have the budget for extended litigation. They'll think twice before running his piece. Ryan exhaled slowly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Marsh is a symptom, not the disease. If he found breadcrumbs, others will too. You need a strategy for managing this, and you need it today. I'm sending a car to your building in 30 minutes. We'll meet at my office, somewhere private, and we'll figure out how to protect your life without destroying it. Sound fair? Ava, I appreciate what you're doing, but I don't want to be indebted. You're not indebted. This is me paying forward what you gave my family years ago. Security, safety, and the space to live without fear. That's all I'm offering you. The question is whether you'll let me. Ryan looked at Lucy's drawings on the refrigerator. Stick figures of the 2 of them holding hands, a crayon sun shining overhead, the word family written in uneven letters across the top. His daughter's entire world, rendered in Crayola and innocence. And Derek Marsh wanted to tear it apart for clicks and career advancement. Send the car, Ryan said quietly. 33 minutes later, Ryan was sitting in the back of Ava's black SUV, watching Seattle slide past through tinted windows. The security guard from earlier was driving. He'd introduced himself as Marcus, former Secret Service, quiet and competent in the way that marked real professionals. Ryan studied the man's movements, the way he checked mirrors, the unconscious habit of scanning crowds for threats, and recognized a kindred spirit. Marcus had seen things too. Marcus understood that the world had wolves in it. Lang Industries occupied 15 floors of a downtown high-rise with views of the Sound. The lobby was all glass and steel and minimalist design, the kind of space that communicated wealth without being vulgar about it. Marcus bypassed the main elevators and led Ryan to a private one that required a key card, and they rode to the executive floor in silence. Ava's office was a corner suite that probably cost more per month than Ryan's annual salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls, expensive art that might have been originals, a desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of dark wood. But what caught Ryan's attention was the wall of photographs, dozens of them in matching frames, a visual history of the Lang family. Thomas Lang shaking hands with governors and CEOs. Ava at various ages, from gap-toothed child to polished executive. Sophie's graduation, her art exhibitions, candid shots of the sisters laughing together. And in 3 of the photos, barely visible in the background, a younger Ryan in a dark suit, his face serious, his body angled to watch the crowd while the Langs smiled for the camera. "I never forgot," Ava said quietly from behind him. She'd entered without him noticing, which annoyed him. "Even after you left, I kept you in the photos. Sophie used to joke that you were like a ghost, present but invisible, always watching from the edges. She missed you, you know. We both did." Ryan turned to face her. "I couldn't stay. You understand that, right? Your father wanted me to run corporate security, but that would have meant staying in that world. I needed to be someone different, someone clean." "I understand better than you think." Ava gestured to the chairs arranged by the windows. "When I took over as CEO 3 years ago, I had to become someone different too. Someone harder, more decisive, willing to make choices that disappointed people I loved. Reinvention isn't easy, but it's necessary when the old version of yourself can't survive in the new environment." They sat, and Ava pulled out a tablet, bringing up a screen full of data. "So here's where we are. The video has now been viewed 4.2 million times across all platforms. 6 news outlets have requested interviews with you, and that number will grow throughout the day. Social media sentiment is mixed, about 60% supportive, 40% skeptical or mocking. The skeptics are the ones we worry about because they're the ones asking questions." She swiped to a new screen. "Meanwhile, I've had my team do a deeper dive into your digital footprint. They found some things that concern me, not because they're criminal, but because they're anomalous. You have a credit history that starts 12 years ago, employment records that check out but feel curated, references that are real but superficial. Anyone with resources and motivation could start pulling those threads, and eventually they'd unravel something. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to create problems. So what are you suggesting?" "We get ahead of it. We control the narrative before someone else writes it for you." Ava pulled up a document. Option 1. You give an exclusive interview to a reputable journalist. I'm thinking Sarah Chen at the Seattle Times. She's fair and thorough. Where you present yourself as a former security professional who left the industry to raise your daughter after your wife passed. You don't specify who you worked for or what exactly you did, just that you had training and instincts that kicked in when you saw someone in danger. It's honest enough to be believable and vague enough to not be verifiable. And when they ask why I left security work, you tell the truth, because being a father became more important than being a guardian for other people's families. It's sympathetic. It's human. It redirects the focus from your past to your present. Most importantly, it gives the media a story to run that isn't based on conspiracy theories and anonymous sources. Ryan considered this. It made sense tactically. Give them enough truth to satisfy curiosity, but frame it in a way that closed doors rather than opening them. The problem was that interviews had a way of going off script, and once he started talking about his past, even in general terms, he risked saying something that someone, somewhere, would recognize as significant. What's option 2? Option 2 is we go the opposite direction. We use the resources I have to scrub your presence from the internet as much as possible, threaten anyone who tries to dig with legal action, and generally make pursuing the story more trouble than it's worth. It's defensive rather than proactive, which means we're always reacting instead of controlling. But it keeps you out of the spotlight completely. Which do you recommend? Ava was quiet for a moment, her fingers steepled in front of her face. Honestly, option 1. Because option 2 only works if the story dies naturally, and I don't think it will. You're too interesting. A working-class hero who moves like a trained operator? That's narrative gold. Someone will keep digging, and eventually they'll dig up something we can't control. At least with option 1, we're shaping the narrative from a position of strength. Ryan stood and walked to the windows, looking down at the city 16 floors below. Somewhere down there, Lucy was having breakfast with Mrs. Chen, probably watching cartoons, blissfully unaware that her father's past was collapsing into his present. He'd worked so hard to give her a normal life, the kind of childhood where the biggest worry was homework and the biggest adventure was the playground. Now that normalcy was threatened by a video that had turned him into content, into a curiosity, into something other people felt entitled to investigate. If I do the interview, he said slowly, I need guarantees. No photos of Lucy, no mention of her school or our address. Nothing that makes her more vulnerable than she already is. Agreed. I'll negotiate those terms personally with Sarah Chen. Anything else? Yeah, I need to know why you're really doing this. Ryan turned to face Ava. And don't tell me it's just gratitude for saving Sophie. You're not someone who makes business decisions based on emotions. So what's the calculation here? What do you get out of helping me? Ava met his gaze without flinching. You want the honest answer, the one I wouldn't say in front of my board? Please. When you left, I was 22 and convinced I had the world figured out. I was about to take a position in my father's company, start climbing the ladder, prove that I was more than just Thomas Lang's daughter. And I remember the last conversation we had. You were walking out the front door of the estate, and I asked you why you were leaving when we needed you. Do you remember what you said? Ryan shook his head. You said, Ms. Lang, the measure of good security is when you don't notice it's gone. If I've done my job right, you'll never realize how much danger you were actually in, and you'll be free to take risks because someone else was managing them for you. That's the gift. The freedom to be brave. Ava's voice softened. I built a company on that philosophy, that my job was to manage risk so other people could innovate. I've spent 15 years trying to be for my employees what you were for my family, and last night, when I saw you protect Sophie without hesitation, I realized you were still doing that, still managing risk, still giving people the freedom to be brave. She paused. So the honest answer is this. I'm helping you because you taught me what leadership actually looks like, and because the world needs more people like you in it, and selfishly, because I'd like to have you back in my life, even tangentially. You were the only adult who never treated me like a child or an heiress. You treated me like someone capable of understanding hard truths. I've missed that. Ryan felt something in his chest loosen, a tension he'd carried for 15 years, wondering if leaving had been a betrayal. You turned out exactly like I thought you would. Your father must be proud. He was. He passed away 2 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden. Ava's professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing grief that was still sharp. I wish he could have seen you last night. He always believed you were the best decision he ever made regarding our safety. Losing you was one of his few regrets. I'm sorry. Thomas was a good man. He was. And he taught me that debts of honor outlast their original context. So let me do this. Let me protect you the way you protected us. It's what he would have wanted. Ryan nodded slowly. Okay, set up the interview, but I want final approval on the article before it runs, and I want your legal team reviewing every word. If they publish something we didn't agree to, I'm holding you responsible. Fair enough? Ava smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since she'd appeared at his door this morning. Welcome back, Cole, even if it's just temporary. It's Ryan now. Cole is someone I used to be. Ryan, then. I'll have contracts drawn up regarding the interview terms, and I'll reach out to Sarah Chen today. In the meantime, I'd suggest you stay off social media and don't respond to any calls from numbers you don't recognize. Marcus will drive you home and stay posted outside your building in case any journalists show up. I'll also arrange for someone to escort Lucy to and from school starting tomorrow. Discreetly, nothing that will scare her, just making sure no one bothers her. Ryan wanted to argue that he could protect his own daughter, but pride was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Thank you. Thank yourself. You're the one who jumped into danger when most people would have walked past. Ava stood, extending her hand. We'll get through this, I promise. Ryan shook her hand, feeling the firm grip of someone used to making deals that stuck. As Marcus drove him back through the city, Ryan stared out at the rain starting to fall again, wondering if Ava's promise was one she could actually keep. The internet didn't forget. The past had a way of surfacing no matter how deep you buried it, and somewhere out there, Derek Marsh was probably already working on his next angle, his next threat, his next attempt to turn Ryan's life into a commodity. The SUV pulled up outside Ryan's building, and Marcus turned in his seat. I'll be here all day and night. Anyone approaches who seems off, I'll handle it. You've got my number if you need anything. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. When you left the Secret Service, was it hard, adjusting to civilian life? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Every day. You spend years in a heightened state, scanning for threats that might never come, running scenarios in your head about how to protect your principal if everything goes to hell. Then you leave, and suddenly you're supposed to care about traffic jams and mortgage payments and what to make for dinner. It's like going from color to black and white. Everything feels muted. Does it get easier? No, but you get better at pretending it does. That's the best we can hope for, I think, learning to fake normal until it feels almost real. Marcus offered a slight smile. You'll be all right, Mr. Cole. People like us, we're survivors. We adapt. Ryan got out of the SUV and headed upstairs, Marcus's words echoing in his head. Learning to fake normal until it feels almost real. That's what he'd been doing for 3 years, and it had almost worked. He'd almost convinced himself that Ryan Cole, the construction worker, was his true self, and everything before was the lie. Last night had blown that comfortable delusion apart. Mrs. Chen's apartment smelled like ginger and jasmine tea. Lucy was curled up on the couch watching cartoons, still in her pajamas, safe and happy and ignorant of the storm gathering around them. When she saw Ryan, she brightened immediately. Daddy, Mrs. Chen made me dumplings for breakfast. Can she make breakfast every day? That would be taking advantage of Mrs. Chen's kindness, sweetheart, but we can ask her to teach us how to make dumplings ourselves. Lucy wrinkled her nose. Your dumplings are always lumpy. Practice makes perfect. Mrs. Chen appeared from her kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was very good, no trouble at all. But Ryan, there were 3 reporters in front of building this morning. I told them I'd call police if they didn't leave. They left, but they'll be back. Ryan's jaw tightened. It was starting. Thank you for handling that, and for taking care of Lucy. I owe you. Oh, you owe me nothing, but maybe you tell me truth now, yes? About who you really are, because I watched that video and I think, that is not a man who builds houses. That is a man who breaks things for living. Ryan glanced at Lucy, who was absorbed in her cartoons. Can we talk in the hall? Outside Mrs. Chen's apartment, Ryan kept his voice low. I used to work in security, personal protection for wealthy families. It was a long time ago, before Emma, before Lucy. I left because I wanted a different life. But what I learned, you don't really forget that kind of training. It just sits there waiting. Mrs. Chen studied his face with the shrewd eyes of someone who'd survived her own share of hardships. She'd emigrated from China 40 years ago, raised 3 kids alone after her husband died, understood that people had complicated histories. This security work, it was legal? Yes. And you are not wanted by police? No. Then I don't care about your past. I care that you are a good father, good neighbor, good man. The rest? She made a dismissive gesture. The rest is noise. But you protect Lucy, yes? Don't let this noise hurt her. I won't, I promise. Mrs. Chen nodded, satisfied. Good. Now take your daughter home and feed her something other than pancakes. Growing girl needs vegetables. Back in his own apartment, Ryan tried to maintain normalcy for Lucy's sake. He made lunch, sandwiches, and carrot sticks because Mrs. Chen's judgment had stung a little, and they ate together while Lucy chattered about the cartoon she'd been watching. But he could see her watching him with slightly too much attention, the way kids did when they sensed something was wrong but weren't sure what. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "Mrs. Chen said there were reporters outside, and you seem worried. You get this line here." She touched her forehead. "When you're worried." Ryan forced himself to relax his expression. "I'm not worried. I'm just thinking. Sometimes people are curious about things they see online and they ask too many questions. But it's nothing bad, just annoying. Is it because of what you did last night, saving that lady?" "Yes." "People should leave you alone. You're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Lucy. Heroes don't exist outside of stories. I'm just a dad who did what needed doing." Lucy pushed her carrots around her plate. "In school, we learned about heroes. Teacher said heroes are people who help others even when it's hard or scary. That's what you did." "Maybe. But being a hero comes with complications. People want to know things about you. They want to understand why you did what you did. And sometimes explaining gets messy." "Then don't explain. Just tell them you're my dad and dads protect people. That's what dads do." Ryan smiled despite himself. "You make it sound so simple." "Because it is simple. Grown-ups make everything complicated." She took a bite of sandwich, swallowed, then looked at him seriously. "Are we going to have to move again? Like when Mommy died and we moved here?" The question hit Ryan like a fist. Lucy had been 5 when Emma died, and the move from their old apartment, the one they'd shared as a family, to this place had been traumatic. She'd lost her mother and her home in the span of weeks. The thought of putting her through that again made Ryan's chest hurt. "No, baby, we're not moving. This is our home. Nobody's making us leave." "Promise?" "I promise." It was a promise he hoped he could keep. The rest of the day passed in strange suspension, Ryan hovering near his phone, waiting for updates from Ava, while Lucy played with her toys and watched movies, blissfully unaware of the machinery working in the background to protect their life. Marcus texted twice to report that 2 more journalists had approached the building and been turned away. Ava called once to say she'd spoken with Sarah Chen, and the interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning at a neutral location. By evening, the view count on the video had reached 6 million. Ryan made the mistake of scrolling through comments again and immediately regretted it. The discourse had devolved into conspiracy theories, some people claiming he was ex-CIA, others insisting the whole thing was staged, a few threatening to find out where he lived, and get the real story. He blocked the app and put his phone face down on the counter. After Lucy went to bed, Ryan stood at his window looking out at the street. Marcus's SUV was still there, a dark shape under the streetlights, and Ryan felt a weird mix of gratitude and resentment. He'd spent years protecting other people. Now he needed protection himself, and it grated against every instinct he had. His phone buzzed, unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, older, warm. "My name is Margaret Torres. I'm a producer for Good Morning Pacific. I'd love to talk to you about appearing on our show to discuss what happened last night." "I'm not interested. I understand you've probably been inundated with requests, but I want you to know that we'd handle your story with respect. We're not interested in sensationalism. We just think the public deserves to hear from the man himself rather than relying on speculation. I've already committed to an interview, but thank you. May I ask who with?" "No." There was a pause, then a slight hardening in her tone. "Mr. Cole, I want to be direct with you. We're going to run a segment on this story tomorrow morning, regardless of whether you participate. We have footage, we have the viral video, and we have sources who claim to know things about your background. You can either be part of shaping that narrative, or you can let us do it without you. Your choice." "That sounds a lot like a threat, Ms. Torres." "It's a reality. This is news. Your news. And in our business, the story runs whether the subject cooperates or not. I'm giving you the opportunity to have your voice included." Ryan felt his temper rising. "Then include this. I'm a private citizen who helped someone in danger. That's the entire story. Everything else is speculation and invasion of privacy. If you run sources making claims about me without verification, I'll consider it defamation." "Noted, but public interest is a defense, Mr. Cole, and whether you like it or not, you're now a figure of public interest. Good evening." She hung up. Ryan stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, and felt the walls closing in. They were coming from every angle: journalists, producers, freelancers, all of them circling like sharks drawn to blood in the water. And no matter how much Ava tried to protect him, no matter how many cease and desist letters her lawyers sent, the fundamental problem remained. He was interesting. His story had gaps that people wanted to fill. And in a world where content was currency, his privacy was worthless compared to the value of a compelling narrative. He sent Ava a text, "Need to talk. Soon." Her response came 30 seconds later. "My office, 8 a.m. We'll handle this." Ryan wanted to believe her, but as he finally went to bed, listening to the rain start up again outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of a cliff, and tomorrow, someone was going to push. The morning came too fast and brought with it a headache that pulsed behind Ryan's eyes like a second heartbeat. He'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, his mind churning through scenarios and contingencies until the alarm dragged him back to consciousness at 6. Lucy was still asleep, her small form buried under blankets decorated with stars and moons, one arm thrown over her stuffed bear. Ryan watched her for a moment from the doorway, committing the peaceful scene to memory like a photograph he might need later when things got worse, because things always got worse before they got better. That was the lesson 20 years had taught him. He showered quickly, dressed in the closest thing he had to business casual, dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Emma had bought him for a job interview years ago, and left a note for Lucy on the kitchen counter explaining that Mrs. Chen would take her to school and he'd pick her up this afternoon. The lie sat heavy in his stomach. He had no idea what today would bring, whether he'd be back by 3 or if his life would implode so spectacularly that picking up his daughter from school would become someone else's responsibility. Marcus was waiting outside in the SUV, looking alert despite the early hour. The drive downtown was quiet except for the morning news on the radio, and Ryan's stomach dropped when the anchor's voice turned cheerful and said, "Coming up after the break, we'll discuss the viral video that has Seattle talking. Who is the mysterious construction worker with military-grade combat skills, and why is he refusing to talk about his past?" Marcus reached over and turned off the radio without comment. Ava's office building looked different in the morning light, more intimidating somehow, all glass and steel reflecting the gray sky like a corporate fortress. They rode the private elevator again, and this time when the doors opened, Ava was waiting in the hallway. She looked like she hadn't slept much either, though her suit was immaculate and her expression was all business. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Good Morning Pacific ran their segment 20 minutes ago." Ryan felt ice slide through his veins. "What did they say?" "Come see for yourself." She led him into a conference room where a laptop sat open on the table, the video already queued up. Ryan recognized Margaret Torres immediately. 50s, professional smile, sitting across from her co-anchor with that peculiar brand of manufactured concern that television personalities wore like makeup. Ava hit play. "This morning, we're following up on a story that's captured the attention of millions online," Torres said, her voice warm and inviting. 2 nights ago, a man identified as Ryan Cole intervened in an attempted assault in Seattle's warehouse district, disarming 2 attackers with what experts are calling professional-level combat techniques. But questions are mounting about who this man really is and what his background actually entails. The video cut to the alley footage, now enhanced somehow, the image quality better than the original, showing Ryan's movements in clearer detail. A freeze frame highlighted the moment when he stripped the gun from the first attacker, and a red circle appeared around his hands, zooming in on the precision of the technique. "We showed this footage to Daniel Rourke, a former Navy SEAL who now runs a security consulting firm," Torres continued, and the screen shifted to show a man in his 40s with a severe haircut and the confident bearing of someone used to being listened to. "Daniel, what did you see when you watched this video?" "What I saw," Rourke said, his voice carrying the flat authority of a professional, "was someone with advanced close-quarters combat training. The way he controlled the weapon hand, the joint manipulation, the transition to the second target, that's not something you learn in a weekend self-defense course. That's the result of hundreds of hours of repetition, the kind of training you find in military special operations or high-level private security." "So you're saying Mr. Cole has a military background?" "I'm saying he has training that suggests either military or professional security work. The efficiency is what stands out. No wasted movement, no hesitation. That's someone who's done this before, probably many times. Torres nodded gravely. We reached out to Mr. Cole multiple times for comment, but he declined to be interviewed. We also attempted to verify his employment history and found some interesting gaps. According to public records, Ryan Cole began working in construction 12 years ago, but before that, his employment history is unclear. There are no military service records under that name, no professional licenses, no digital footprint before 2013. It's as if Ryan Cole simply appeared fully formed 12 years ago. The video cut back to Torres in the studio. Now, there could be innocent explanations for this: name changes, privacy concerns, witness protection. But the lack of transparency has led to speculation online, with some suggesting Mr. Cole might be hiding something more significant. We've reached out to several government agencies to see if they can shed light on his background, but so far, no one is commenting. Ryan's hands clenched into fists under the table. They were painting him as suspicious, as someone with secrets that warranted investigation by government agencies. And the worst part was they weren't wrong. He did have secrets, secrets that could unravel everything if the wrong people started pulling at those threads. The segment continued with Torres reading statements from the Seattle Police Department, praising Cole's intervention while declining to comment on his background, then shifted to man-on-the-street interviews where random people speculated wildly about who he might be. The conspiracy theories ranged from former CIA operative to witness protection to foreign intelligence agent. One woman suggested he might be a superhero, which would have been funny if the situation weren't so dire. Finally, Torres wrapped up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Whatever Ryan Cole's past may hold, there's no denying he helped someone in need. But the question remains, in an age of transparency, do we have a right to know more about the people who become overnight heroes? That's a conversation worth having. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you updates as they develop. Ava closed the laptop. It's bad. It's worse than bad, Ryan said quietly. They basically just told every intelligence agency with internet access that there's someone in Seattle with training they can't account for. That's how you get flagged. That's how you get investigated by people with resources I can't hide from. I know, which is why we need to move up the timeline on our interview with Sarah Chen. If we don't control this narrative today, right now, someone else will, and they won't be as careful with the truth. Ava pulled out her phone and started typing. I'm having Sarah meet us here in 2 hours. That gives us time to prepare your statement and make sure we're not leaving any openings for follow-up speculation. 2 hours. Ava, I haven't even figured out what I'm going to say yet. Then we figure it out together. That's why I have a team. She gestured toward the door, and Ryan followed her down the hall to a larger conference room where 3 people were already waiting, 2 women and a man, all dressed in business attire, all looking at Ryan with the analytical expressions of people whose job was solving problems. Ryan Cole, meet my crisis management team, Ava said. This is Jennifer Park. She handles media relations. David Ortiz, he's my legal counsel. And Dr. Amanda Walsh, she consults on communications strategy. They've all signed NDAs that would bankrupt them if they violate your privacy, and they're here to help craft a narrative that protects you while satisfying public curiosity. Jennifer spoke first, her voice crisp and efficient. Mr. Cole, we've been reviewing the media coverage and social sentiment analysis. The good news is that public opinion is still largely sympathetic. People see you as someone who did the right thing. The bad news is that the mystery around your background is feeding speculation that could turn ugly. We need to give them answers that feel complete without actually revealing anything actionable. Meaning what, exactly? Ryan asked. David leaned forward. Meaning we acknowledge you have a background in security without specifying details that could be verified or contradicted. We frame your departure from that industry as a personal choice related to family priorities, which is emotionally satisfying and effectively closes the door on further inquiry. Most importantly, we emphasize that you're a private citizen who acted heroically but doesn't owe the public a detailed autobiography. Dr. Walsh, who'd been studying Ryan with unsettling intensity, finally spoke. Mr. Cole, I specialize in trauma communication and crisis psychology. What I need to understand is what you're most afraid of. Not professionally afraid, personally afraid. What's the worst-case scenario in your mind? Ryan was quiet for a moment, weighing how honest to be. But these people had been hired to protect him, and they couldn't do that effectively if he held back. Worst case, someone from my old life recognizes me from the coverage and decides I'm a liability, or someone I worked against 15 years ago decides this is an opportunity for revenge. Or, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, someone uses my daughter to get to me. Lucy is 8. She's innocent, and if anything happened to her because I got careless or proud or thought I could help someone without consequences. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Dr. Walsh nodded slowly, and something in her expression suggested she understood trauma in ways that academic credentials couldn't explain. Then our primary objective is establishing boundaries, she said. We make it clear that your past is closed for discussion, that your daughter is completely off limits, and that any attempts to dig further will be met with legal action. We don't do this defensively. Defense suggests guilt. We do it from a position of principled privacy. You're a father protecting his child. That's universally sympathetic. And if they keep digging anyway? Ryan asked. Then we make it expensive and time-consuming enough that most outlets decide it's not worth the resources, David said. Ava's legal budget is effectively unlimited for this purpose. We can tie up any legitimate news organization in litigation for years if necessary. The freelancers and bloggers are harder to control, but they also have less reach and credibility. Jennifer pulled up a document on her laptop. I've drafted a statement framework for your interview with Sarah Chen. It acknowledges your security background in general terms, emphasizes your current role as a single father, and redirects focus to the actual incident rather than your history. The key is striking a balance between transparency and privacy. Give them enough that they feel satisfied without giving them anything they can actually investigate. She turned the laptop so Ryan could read the screen. He scanned the carefully worded paragraphs, each sentence calibrated to reveal nothing while appearing to reveal something. It was masterful manipulation, really, the kind of language that politicians used when they wanted to answer a question without actually answering it. This makes me sound like a politician, Ryan said. Good, Jennifer replied. Politicians stay in office precisely because they've mastered the art of seeming transparent while maintaining privacy. You're not lying. Everything in this statement is factually true. You're just controlling what truths get emphasized and which ones get glossed over. Ryan read it again, and this time he could see the structure. The emotional appeals that would make viewers sympathetic, the vague references that suggested importance without providing details, the pivot to Lucy that would make him human rather than mysterious. It was brilliant. It was also exhausting to think about performing this kind of careful verbal dance for a journalist who'd be looking for any crack in the facade. What if she asks something I'm not prepared for, he asked. What if she pushes on something I can't answer? Then you fall back on your training, Ava said quietly. You've been interrogated before, I assume, by people much more skilled than Sarah Chen. Ryan nodded slowly. He'd sat through hostile interrogations, friendly interrogations, interrogations that lasted hours while people tried to break him down or trip him up. This should be easier than that. Should be. The difference, Dr. Walsh interjected, is that in those situations you didn't care what your interrogators thought of you. Here, you need Sarah and her audience to like you, to empathize with you, to see you as a good man who deserves privacy. That requires a different skill set. You need to be vulnerable without being weak, honest without being revealing, firm without being hostile. How do I do that? You think about Lucy while you're talking. Every answer you give, you frame through the lens of protecting her. That keeps you grounded in what matters and gives your responses authentic emotional weight. People can tell when someone is lying to protect themselves. They're more forgiving when someone is lying to protect their child. Ryan met Dr. Walsh's eyes and saw understanding there, the kind that came from personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. You've done this before, been in this situation. Not exactly this situation, but I know what it's like to have a past that needs staying buried for good reasons. And I know what it costs to maintain that burial every single day. She offered a slight smile. You're not alone in this, Mr. Cole. Reinvention is more common than people think. Most of us are just better at hiding the seams. The next hour was spent rehearsing answers, anticipating questions, and refining the narrative until Ryan could recite it in his sleep. Jennifer played the role of Sarah Chen, throwing increasingly aggressive questions at him while David and Dr. Walsh critiqued his responses. He stumbled at first. his natural instinct toward silence and deflection working against the need to seem open and forthcoming. But gradually, he found the rhythm. Acknowledge, empathize, redirect. Give them emotion instead of facts. Make them care about his daughter more than they cared about his past. By the time Sarah Chen actually arrived, Ryan felt as prepared as he was going to be. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she didn't suffer fools. Ava made the introductions, and they settled into a smaller conference room that had been set up to look less corporate and more intimate. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, a small table with water glasses, everything designed to make the conversation feel casual rather than adversarial. Sarah set up a small recording device and pulled out a notebook, her movements efficient and practiced. "Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to talk with me. I understand you've been turning down interview requests." "I have," Ryan said, keeping his voice calm and measured. "Not because I have anything to hide, but because I'm a private person with a daughter to protect. The attention has been overwhelming." "I can imagine. The video has been viewed over 8 million times now. How does that feel, knowing millions of people have watched you in what must have been a terrifying moment?" "Honestly, it feels invasive. I didn't intervene in that situation for recognition or attention. I did it because someone needed help and I was there. The fact that someone filmed it and it went viral, that's been the hardest part. I'm just trying to be a good father and a good person. Suddenly being scrutinized by strangers makes both of those things harder." Sarah nodded, making notes. "Let's talk about what happened that night. Walk me through your decision-making process. What were you thinking when you saw those two men?" Ryan took a breath, centering himself the way Dr. Walsh had coached. "I was thinking about my daughter. She was with me, and I needed to make sure she was safe first. But I also saw a woman who was clearly in danger, and I couldn't just walk past that. My late wife always believed in helping people when you can. It's a value I'm trying to pass on to Lucy." "Your wife passed away 3 years ago, is that correct?" "Yes. Car accident. Lucy was 5. Ryan let his voice roughen slightly. Not hard to do when talking about Emma, the grief still close enough to touch. "Raising her alone has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Every decision I make is filtered through the question of what's best for her, what keeps her safe, what teaches her to be a good person." "And you felt that intervening in that situation, even with your daughter present, was the right decision?" "I felt it was the necessary decision. Was it ideal to have Lucy there? No, but sometimes life doesn't give you ideal circumstances. It gives you a choice between walking away and living with the regret, or stepping up and dealing with the consequences. I chose to step up." Sarah studied him for a moment, and Ryan could see her recalibrating, moving away from the angle she'd planned and toward something more sympathetic. "The video shows you disarming those men with remarkable efficiency. You clearly have training. Can you talk about your background?" Here was the pivot point. Ryan met her eyes steadily. "I worked in private security for a number of years, protecting people and property for clients who needed that level of service. It required training in risk assessment, defensive tactics, and emergency response. When my wife got pregnant with Lucy, I started questioning whether that was the life I wanted. And when Emma died and I became a single father, the answer became clear. I needed to be present for my daughter, not traveling for security assignments or working unpredictable hours. So I left that career and found work in construction. It's stable, local, and it lets me be home for Lucy every night." "But the training stayed with you." "Muscle memory doesn't forget. I've spent the last 3 years deliberately choosing ordinary, but when someone's in danger, that training kicks in automatically. I'm not proud of having to use it. I'm just grateful it was available when someone needed it." Sarah made more notes, and Ryan could see the narrative forming in her mind. Reformed security professional, devoted single father, reluctant hero. It was exactly what they'd crafted, and she was buying it because it made narrative sense. People wanted stories with clear arcs, troubled past, redemption through family, heroic action proving the change was genuine. He was giving her that story gift-wrapped. "There's been speculation online about your background," Sarah said carefully. "Some people have pointed out that public records on you are sparse before about 12 years ago. How do you respond to suggestions that you might be hiding something more significant?" Ryan allowed himself a slight smile, the kind that suggested he found the conspiracy theories more amusing than threatening. People love a mystery, and the internet amplifies speculation into certainty. The truth is much more boring than the theories. I value my privacy, I've always valued it, and I was careful about my digital footprint long before social media made everyone's life public. As for my employment history, security work often requires discretion. Clients don't want their protection details documented publicly because that information can be used against them. So yes, my history is private, but that's by design, not because I'm some kind of spy or criminal. What about the suggestion that Ryan Cole might not be your original name? This was the dangerous question, the one that could crack everything open if he mishandled it. Ryan held Sarah's gaze and channeled every ounce of weary sincerity he could muster. Sarah, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you're asking from a place of journalistic integrity rather than sensationalism. My past is my past. I've done nothing illegal, nothing immoral, nothing that would be of legitimate public interest. I've simply chosen to live quietly and raise my daughter away from a career that required too much of me. If that privacy makes me suspicious to some people, I can live with that. What I can't live with is my daughter being hounded by strangers trying to turn my life into entertainment. So I'm asking you, as a journalist and as a human being, to respect that boundary. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her pen still on the paper. Finally, she said, "Fair enough. Let's talk about what happened after you intervened. You stayed with the victim until help arrived?" The rest of the interview passed more smoothly, with Ryan describing Sophie's condition, his conversation with Ava, his concern for both women's safety. He painted himself as someone who'd been in the right place at the right time, nothing more. When Sarah finally turned off her recorder, she looked at him with something approaching respect. "That was good," she said. "Very good, actually. You're either telling the truth or you're the best liar I've ever interviewed." "I'm telling you everything I can," Ryan said, which was itself a carefully calibrated truth. Sarah packed up her equipment. "The piece will run in tomorrow's paper. You'll have a chance to review the quotes I'm using before we go to print. Ava has the contact information for my editor." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Mr. Cole, I think you did the right thing, both in that alley and in protecting your privacy. Not everything needs to be public consumption." After she left, Ryan sagged in his chair, the exhaustion of maintaining perfect control for an hour finally catching up with him. Ava appeared with a glass of water, which he accepted gratefully. "You did well," she said. "Better than well. You gave her a story she can write that will be sympathetic and satisfying without giving her anything she can actually verify. How long before someone tries, anyway?" "We're already working on that. David's team is preparing preemptive legal notices to the major media outlets explaining that any attempt to investigate your background beyond what you've voluntarily disclosed will be considered harassment and met with litigation. It won't stop everyone, but it'll stop the ones who care about their reputation." Ryan drained the water glass. "And the ones who don't care about their reputation?" "We deal with those as they come, one crisis at a time." Ryan's phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen." He answered immediately. "Is Lucy okay?" "Lucy is fine, but Ryan, there are people outside school with cameras. Principal called me because they were trying to ask children about you. I went early to pick her up. She is with me now." Ryan's blood turned cold. "Did they approach Lucy?" "No. Teachers protected her. But Ryan, this is not good. She is scared. She doesn't understand why strangers want to talk about her daddy." "I'm on my way. 20 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Ava. "They went to her school. They tried to question 8-year-olds about me." Ava's expression went from concerned to furious in an instant. "David," she called, and her lawyer appeared in the doorway. "I want to know which outlet sent reporters to a child's elementary school, and I want a lawsuit filed by end of business today. Harassment of minors, emotional distress, whatever charges stick. Make it hurt." "On it." David disappeared. "Marcus will drive you," Ava said. "And Ryan? I'm assigning additional security to Lucy's school and to Mrs. Chen's apartment. No one gets near your daughter without going through trained professionals. That's non-negotiable." Ryan wanted to argue about independence and not needing her help, but the fear coursing through him overrode pride. "Thank you." The drive back felt interminable, traffic conspiring to add extra minutes between him and his daughter. Marcus drove with professional efficiency, but even he couldn't make red lights turn green faster. Ryan's leg bounced with nervous energy, his mind running through scenarios. Lucy being approached by strangers, her face ending up on television, someone using her as leverage to get to him. Each possibility was worse than the last. When they finally reached Mrs. Chen's building, Ryan took the stairs two at a time. He found Lucy curled up on Mrs. Chen's couch, her face blotchy from crying, her stuffed bear clutched to her chest. The moment she saw him, she launched herself across the room and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daddy, there were people with cameras, and they kept asking Miss Peterson questions about you, and everyone was talking, and I was scared." The words tumbled out in a rush, her voice small and frightened in a way that broke his heart. Ryan knelt down to her level, his hands on her shoulders. "Hey, look at me. You're safe. Nobody touched you, nobody bothered you, right?" Lucy nodded, sniffing. "But why do they care about you? Why are they at my school?" "Because grown-ups sometimes make bad decisions about what's important. They think because I helped someone, that means they get to know everything about me. But they're wrong, and we're going to make them stop, okay?" "How?" "By being smart and careful and remembering that we're a team. You and me, we look out for each other. And right now, that means I'm going to pick you up from school every day. And if anyone with a camera tries to talk to you, you walk away and find a teacher. Can you do that?" "I guess. But Daddy, are we in trouble?" Ryan pulled her into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. "No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble. We're just dealing with complicated grown-up nonsense. But it's going to be okay. I promise." It was the second promise he'd made that he desperately hoped he could keep. Mrs. Chen appeared with hot chocolate and cookies, and gradually Lucy calmed down, her childhood resilience reasserting itself. By the time Ryan carried her home to their own apartment, she was chattering about a drawing she'd made in art class, the school incident already receding in the way that childhood trauma sometimes could, not forgotten, but filed away to be processed later. Ryan got her settled with a movie and retreated to the kitchen, where he stared at his phone and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do next. The interview with Sarah Chen would help, but it wouldn't stop everyone. There would always be someone looking for an angle, a conspiracy, a story that hadn't been told. And as long as his face was circulating online, as long as people were curious about the mysterious construction worker with combat skills, his life was exposed in ways he couldn't control. His phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time the area code was Virginia. That meant something. That meant government, potentially. Ryan answered. "Mr. Cole?" A man's voice, educated, careful. "My name is James Whitmore. I'm with the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service. Do you have a moment to talk?" Every alarm bell in Ryan's head went off simultaneously. "About what?" "About your rather impressive performance in that alley video that's been circulating. See, Mr. Cole, we have people who specialize in analyzing combat techniques, and they flagged your particular style of disarmament as consistent with training provided to protective details for high-value targets. That's a fairly specialized skill set, and we tend to keep track of people who have it." I told the journalist, "I worked private security. That's where the training came from." "Right. And yet when we ran your name through our databases, we didn't find any record of you working for any of the legitimate firms that provide that level of training, which creates an interesting puzzle. Either you're using an alias, or you receive training through channels that don't keep official records, or you're just an exceptionally gifted amateur. Care to clarify which it is?" Ryan's mind raced. This was exactly what he'd feared. Someone with resources and authority taking an interest. Someone who could actually dig deep enough to find the things he'd buried. "I'm a private citizen who helped someone. That's all." "Of course, and normally we'd leave it at that. But here's the thing, Mr. Cole. If that is your real name, we also have concerns about potential foreign operatives working in the United States. People with advanced training who appear out of nowhere and don't have verifiable backgrounds tend to draw attention from counterintelligence. I'm sure you understand." "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm suggesting that it would be in your best interest to have a conversation with us. Voluntarily, of course. Just to clear up any misunderstandings and ensure we're all on the same page about who you are and what your intentions might be." "And if I declined this voluntary conversation?" There was a pause, and when Whitmore spoke again, his voice had lost its friendly veneer. Then we start asking more pointed questions through more official channels. Background checks become more thorough. Employment history gets scrutinized more carefully, and sometimes, when we dig deeply enough, we find things that create complications for the people we're investigating. I'd prefer to avoid that outcome. Wouldn't you? Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the trap closing around him. This was leverage, pure and simple. Cooperate, or we'll make your life hell until we find what we're looking for. And the worst part was that Whitmore wasn't bluffing. Government agencies had the resources to unravel identities, to track down the truth, to connect Ryan Cole to his previous life and everyone he'd worked with, including the Langs, including operations that were supposed to stay buried. What exactly do you want? Ryan asked quietly. Basin. Just a conversation? In person. Tomorrow, if possible. There's a coffee shop near Pike Place Market called The Cracked Pot. Meet me there at 10 a.m. We'll talk, you'll answer some questions, and hopefully we can all move forward with a clearer understanding. And if I bring a lawyer? That's your right, but it might suggest you have something more significant to hide than just privacy concerns. Your call, Mr. Cole. The line went dead. Ryan stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, and felt the last vestiges of his carefully constructed life crumbling like sand through his fingers. The government was involved now. The one entity he couldn't deflect with lawyers or threaten with lawsuits or distract with sympathetic interviews. They had the authority to dig into everything, and if they dug deep enough, they'd find connections that would endanger not just him, but everyone he'd ever protected. The Langs would be exposed. Operations that were classified would become vulnerable. People who depended on anonymity would suddenly be in databases that hostile foreign actors could potentially access. All because he'd helped someone in an alley. He called Ava. I need to meet. Now. We have a much bigger problem. An hour later, Ryan was back in Ava's office with her entire team assembled. He'd recounted the conversation with Whitmore word for word, and the reactions ranged from David's professional concern to Dr. Walsh's alarmed silence. Ava herself had gone very still, her face unreadable. They can't actually force you to meet with them without probable cause, David said carefully. But they can make life difficult if you refuse. Audits, investigations, background checks that take months and flag you in various systems. It's harassment dressed up as due diligence. So what do I do? Ryan asked. If I meet with them, I have to either lie or tell truths that compromise other people. If I don't meet with them, they'll dig until they find things that are worse than anything I'd tell them voluntarily. Ava finally spoke, her voice measured and calm despite the situation. You meet with them, but not alone, and not without leverage. What leverage? They're the government. And I'm a CEO with connections in Congress, the State Department, and various intelligence agencies through my father's old business relationships. The thing about government bureaucrats is that they respond to pressure from above. If someone senior to Whitmore makes it clear that pursuing you is politically inconvenient, he'll back off. You can do that? I can try. But Ryan, I need to know what they're likely to find if they dig. I need to understand what we're protecting and what the actual exposure risk is. You don't have to give me details, but I need to know the shape of the problem. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, weighing trust against necessity. Finally, he said, if they dig deep enough, they'll find that I worked for your family, that I was part of a protective detail that operated internationally and occasionally interfaced with U.S. intelligence when threats came from foreign actors. Some of what I did is probably still classified under national security protocols. Some of the people I worked with are probably still active in sensitive positions. If all of that gets dragged into the open because of a viral video, it creates complications for a lot of people who don't deserve them. Ava nodded slowly. Okay, that's actually manageable. You were a private contractor working with U.S. interests, not against them. That makes you a potential asset, not a threat. And the classification angle gives us leverage. They can't investigate too deeply without potentially exposing operations they want to keep quiet. How does that help me? Because I can make calls to people who understand the value of keeping certain things compartmentalized. I can frame your situation as a former contractor who's trying to live quietly, and pushing too hard on him risks exposing operations that are better left buried. Most intelligence agencies would rather let one guy maintain his privacy than crack open a can of worms that includes their own sensitive operations. David nodded. She's right. If we can get someone senior enough to see this as a potential exposure risk rather than an investigation opportunity, they'll tell Whitmore to back off. Government agencies are territorial. They protect their own secrets even if it means not pursuing someone else's. And if that doesn't work, Ryan asked, then you meet with Whitmore. You give him the bare minimum. Yes, you worked security. Yes, you had training. No, you can't discuss specifics due to NDAs and classification. No, you're not a foreign operative. Yes, you're just a dad trying to protect his daughter. You make yourself boring enough that pursuing you isn't worth the resources. Dr. Walsh, who'd been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. There's another consideration here. Your daughter. If government agencies start investigating you actively, that investigation will touch her life, school records, medical records, potentially even questioning her teachers or Mrs. Chen. You need to prepare her for that possibility without terrifying her. Ryan felt sick. She's 8 years old. How do I explain that the government might investigate us? You don't explain the government. You explain that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and other grown-ups have to check to make sure everything's okay. You frame it as annoying but not dangerous. Kids are resilient if you give them a framework that makes sense. Ava stood, moving to her window with its view of the city stretching out below. Ryan, I'm going to make some calls tonight. People who knew my father, people who understand the world you came from. I can't guarantee it'll work, but I'm going to try to make this problem go away before tomorrow's meeting. In the meantime, you should go home, be with Lucy, and try to maintain normalcy for her sake. Whatever happens next, she needs to know her father is steady. Ryan stood as well, feeling the exhaustion in his bones. Why are you doing this, Ava? Really, this goes way beyond repaying a debt. She turned from the window, and in the fading afternoon light she looked younger, closer to the girl he'd protected all those years ago. Because when you worked for us, you made it possible for Sophie and me to live without fear. We could go to school, have friends, make mistakes, all because you were in the background managing threats we never saw. And when you left, I understood it was because you needed to live your own life, have your own family. But I also promised myself that if I ever had the power to return that gift, the gift of living without fear, I would. Consider this me keeping that promise. Ryan felt something in his chest loosen, a tension he'd been carrying since Emma died, and he'd realized he was truly alone in the world. Thank you. Don't thank me until this is over. Go home. Hug your daughter. I'll call you tonight after I've made my appeals. The drive back to his apartment felt surreal, the city lights bleeding together as Marcus navigated evening traffic. Ryan's mind kept circling back to Lucy. What this situation was doing to her, how much exposure she could take before it damaged something fundamental in her sense of security. He'd spent 3 years trying to give her stability, and in one night, all of that had been undermined by a viral video and the good intentions that led him to help a stranger. Would he do it differently if he could go back? Let those men hurt Sophie Lang rather than risk exposing his daughter to this chaos? The thought made him nauseous. No, he couldn't have walked away. That wasn't who he was, and it wasn't who he wanted Lucy to become. But the cost of being good sometimes felt impossibly high. Lucy was already asleep when he got home, curled up in her bed with her bear and a nightlight casting constellation patterns on her ceiling. Mrs. Chen had stayed with her until Ryan returned, and she patted his arm as she left with a grandmother's certainty that everything would work out because it had to. Ryan made himself eat something, though he barely tasted it. He showered, letting the hot water beat against his shoulders, and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. A meeting with a government agent who wanted answers Ryan couldn't give. Potentially an investigation that would unravel everything. Or maybe, if Ava's connections were as good as she believed, a quiet resolution where someone senior made a phone call and Whitmore found better things to do with his time. He was toweling off when his phone rang. Ava. I made the calls, she said without preamble. 3 people who knew my father, who understand the world you came from, who have enough influence to make suggestions that carry weight. 2 of them are making calls tonight to their contacts in State Department and CIA. The 3rd is planning to reach out to Whitmore's supervisor directly with concerns about potential exposure of classified operations. I can't promise it'll work, but I put the pieces in motion. What do I owe you for this? Nothing. But if you insist on keeping a ledger, then consider it down payment on a different question I'm going to ask you eventually. What question? Whether you'd consider coming to work for me. Not in the field, I know you're done with that, but as a security consultant, helping me design systems and protocols that protect people the way you protected my family. It would be mostly remote work, flexible hours, salary that would let Lucy go to better schools, and you to stop worrying about construction accidents putting you out of work. But that's a conversation for later, after this crisis is resolved. Ryan was quiet, processing the offer. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Get some sleep if you can. Call me tomorrow after the meeting, assuming it still happens. After she hung up, Ryan stood in his dark living room and stared at the sleeping city beyond his window. Somewhere out there, phone calls were being made on his behalf. Favors were being called in. The machinery of power was shifting to protect one man and his daughter from the consequences of viral fame. It felt surreal. It felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing the wind could shift direction at any moment and tear everything apart. But for tonight, Lucy was safe. For tonight, the walls were still standing, and that would have to be enough. He finally went to bed, though sleep came in fragments and nightmares. In his dreams, Emma was alive again, standing in that alley with Lucy, watching him fight. When he turned to her for approval, she shook her head sadly. "You promised," she said. "You promised you'd leave that life behind." And then she disappeared, and he was alone with his daughter crying, and strangers with cameras closing in from every direction while he tried to shield her with his body, but there were too many of them, always too many. He woke at 5 a.m., heart pounding, and gave up on sleep. Instead, he made coffee and sat at his kitchen table, watching the dawn break over Seattle, and waited to see if Ava's efforts would be enough to save the life he'd built from the ashes of who he used to be. The morning light filtered through Ryan's kitchen window like a reluctant promise, gray and uncertain, matching the knot of anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in his stomach. He'd already gone through half a pot of coffee by the time Lucy padded out of her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes and dragging her bear behind her. She climbed into his lap without asking, the way she used to do when she was smaller and the world felt safer. "Bad dreams again?" she asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Ryan wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "That's what you always say. But I can tell when you're worried. You do this thing with your jaw." She reached up and touched the side of his face, where the muscles get all tight like you're trying to bite through metal. Despite everything, Ryan smiled. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good, a trait she'd inherited from Emma, along with those auburn curls and that stubborn chin. "You're too smart for 8. I'm almost 9. That's basically a teenager. Please don't rush it. I'm not ready for the teenager years." Lucy pulled back to look at him seriously. "Daddy, are we still in trouble? From the video and the people with cameras?" Ryan chose his words carefully, remembering Dr. Walsh's advice about giving children frameworks that made sense without terrifying them. "We're dealing with some complicated situations, but we're not in danger. Some people are asking questions that they don't really need answers to, and we're working on helping them understand that. It's annoying more than scary, okay? Like when Tommy Berkowitz kept asking me if I had a boyfriend and wouldn't stop even when I said it was none of his business? Exactly like that. Sometimes people don't respect boundaries, and you have to be firm about protecting your privacy. So what are you going to do?" "I have a meeting this morning with someone who has questions. I'm going to answer what I can, be polite, and make it clear that my past is my business. And then hopefully, everyone will find something more interesting to talk about." Lucy considered this, her small face scrunched up in concentration. "Will you be home to pick me up from school?" "Absolutely. Mrs. Chen is going to walk you there this morning, and I'll be at the gate at 3 o'clock sharp. Sound good? Can we get ice cream after, if your meeting goes okay?" Ryan hugged her tighter. "If my meeting goes okay, we'll get ice cream and pizza and watch that movie you've been begging to see. Deal?" "Deal." She squeezed him 3 times, their "I love you," and he squeezed back 4 times before getting up to make her breakfast. The routine of scrambled eggs and toast, of packing her lunch and making sure she had her homework, provided a temporary anchor against the chaos swirling just beyond their apartment walls. Ryan walked Lucy down to Mrs. Chen's at 7:30, thanked the elderly woman for the 1,000th time, and watched them head toward the school until they turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Only then did he allow himself to check his phone. 3 missed calls from Ava, all from the last hour. His stomach dropped as he dialed her back. She answered immediately. Ryan, good news and complicated news. Which do you want first? Good news. I need something positive before 9 a.m. The good news is that my contacts came through. I spoke with someone who used to work with my father on projects that intersected with State Department interests. He made calls last night to people who matter, and those people made calls to other people who matter. The result is that James Whitmore received what I'm told was a very clear conversation from his deputy director at 6 a.m. this morning about the risks of pursuing investigations into former contractors who worked on sensitive operations. Ryan felt some of the tension in his shoulders ease. So he's backing off? That's the complicated news. He's not backing off entirely, but he's been redirected. Instead of treating you as a potential foreign operative, he's now treating you as a former asset who needs to be handled delicately. The meeting is still on, but the tone has shifted from interrogation to verification. He needs to confirm you are who you say you are and that you're not a security risk, but he's been instructed to do so without creating unnecessary exposure. What does that actually mean in practice? It means he'll ask questions, you'll give general answers, and as long as you don't say anything that raises new red flags, he'll close the file and move on. Think of it as a bureaucratic checkbox exercise rather than a genuine investigation. He needs to write a report that says he followed up on a potential concern and determined there was nothing actionable. You just need to give him enough material to write that report. Ryan exhaled slowly. That's better than I hoped for. How did you pull that off? My father spent 30 years building relationships with people in positions of influence. When he passed away, those relationships transferred to me, at least partially. I called in every favor I had, made some promises I'll have to keep later, and emphasized that pursuing you would create more problems than it solved. Turns out the intelligence community really doesn't like when private contractors who know things start getting publicly investigated. Too many potential threads that lead to operations they'd rather keep quiet. Ava, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by surviving this meeting without saying anything that reignites their interest. Be boring, be cooperative, be exactly what they want you to be, a former contractor who's retired and poses no threat to anyone. Can you do that? I've played roles before. I can do it again. Good. Call me as soon as it's over. And Ryan, you're not alone in this. Remember that. After they hung up, Ryan showered and dressed in what he hoped struck the right balance between respectable and unmemorable. Khaki pants, a button-down shirt, a jacket that hid the fact that he'd lost weight from stress over the past few days. He studied himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man looking back. When had the lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had the gray in his stubble spread so far? He looked like someone who'd lived several lives, which wasn't far from the truth. Marcus drove him downtown, navigating the morning traffic with the same professional efficiency he brought to everything. The Cracked Pot was a small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a law office, the kind of place that catered to regulars and didn't have free Wi-Fi, which probably made it ideal for conversations people wanted to keep private. Ryan arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a black coffee he didn't particularly want, then claimed a table near the back where he could see both the entrance and the emergency exit. Old habits. James Whitmore walked in at exactly 10 o'clock, and Ryan recognized him immediately. Mid-40s, average height and build, wearing business casual clothes that helped him blend into any crowd. His eyes swept the shop in the practiced way of someone trained to assess spaces, and when they landed on Ryan, something flickered across his face. Recognition? Respect? Hard to tell. Whitmore ordered tea, Earl Grey, no sugar, and joined Ryan at the table, setting down a slim leather portfolio and offering a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to meet. Did I have much choice? You always have choices. Some are just more pleasant than others. Whitmore opened his portfolio and pulled out a tablet, which he set on the table between them. I'll be direct because I suspect you appreciate directness. I received a call this morning from my deputy director explaining that your background intersects with some sensitive operations and that I should tread carefully. That tells me two things. One, you have powerful friends making calls on your behalf. And two, you were involved in something classified enough that even investigating you creates exposure risks. Ryan sipped his coffee and said nothing. Let Whitmore talk. So here's where we are, Whitmore continued. I need to file a report that explains who you are, confirms you're not a security threat, and closes this inquiry without opening new ones. The easiest way to do that is for you to give me enough information that I can write former contractor, no longer active, no concerns, and move on. Are you willing to cooperate with that process? Depends on what you're asking. Fair enough. Whitmore tapped his tablet and brought up what looked like a form with various fields. Let's start simple. Is Ryan Cole your legal name? Yes, has been for the past 12 years. And before that? Before that isn't relevant to your investigation. Whitmore's expression didn't change, but Ryan saw the slight tension in his jaw. Mr. Cole, I'm trying to help you here. If I go back to my superiors and say you refuse to answer basic questions, it makes my report longer and more complicated. If I can say you were forthcoming about your background within reasonable security constraints, everyone's life gets easier. Ryan considered this. Ava's contacts had bought him some latitude, but refusing to engage at all would undermine their efforts. He needed to give Whitmore something without giving him anything that could be verified or contradicted. Before 12 years ago, I worked under different names for different clients depending on the situation. That was standard practice in private security when you're working international contracts. Clients don't want their protection details publicly documented. Who did you work for? Private families, primarily. High net worth individuals who needed protection for themselves and their dependents. I signed NDAs that are still in effect, so I can't give you names without violating contractual obligations. Those NDAs wouldn't supersede national security concerns. No, but they'd require a subpoena to overcome, and I suspect your deputy director made it clear that pursuing subpoenas would be counterproductive. Whitmore's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but acknowledgement that Ryan had read the situation correctly. Let's try a different angle. The training you displayed in that video, where did you receive it? A combination of sources. Military training initially, then additional instruction through private firms that specialized in executive protection. Some defensive tactics training, some weapons training, some emergency medical response. Standard package for that line of work. Which branch of military? Does it matter? I'm no longer active duty, haven't been for nearly 20 years, and my service record is my own business, unless you have a specific security concern that requires access to it. Whitmore typed something on his tablet, and Ryan caught a glimpse of the screen. He was literally filling out a form, checking boxes, entering Ryan's answers into fields that probably fed into a database somewhere. This really was just bureaucratic procedure, exactly as Ava had predicted. Did your work ever bring you into contact with foreign intelligence services? Whitmore asked. Occasionally, clients faced threats from various actors, including state-sponsored ones. That's why they hired professional protection. But I never worked for foreign governments, never shared classified U.S. information, never did anything that would constitute espionage or treason. Did you work with U.S. intelligence agencies? I interfaced with them when client security concerns overlapped with national security interests. Cooperative relationships, not employment. I was a private contractor protecting private individuals, but when those individuals faced threats that U.S. agencies cared about, we coordinated. Whitmore made more notes. Are you currently in contact with any of your former clients or colleagues from that line of work? This was the dangerous question, the one that could create connections between Ryan and the Langs if answered wrong. He chose his words carefully. I left that career to focus on raising my daughter. I'm not active in that community anymore. If former clients or colleagues reached out to me, hypothetically, I would help them if I could, because relationships built on trust don't expire just because employment ends. But I'm not seeking out that world. I'm trying to live quietly and be a good father. And the incident in the alley, that wasn't seeking out that world? That was responding to someone in immediate danger. If you're asking whether I'm looking for opportunities to use violence or relive my former career, the answer is no. I would be perfectly happy never using those skills again. But I'm not going to walk past someone being assaulted just to maintain my anonymity. Whitmore studied him for a long moment, and Ryan met his gaze steadily. Finally, the agent nodded slowly. Okay, I think I have what I need. For the record, let me summarize. You're a former military member who transitioned to private security work protecting high-value clients, received advanced training appropriate to that role, interfaced with U.S. agencies when necessary, left the industry 12 years ago for personal reasons, and are now working construction while raising your daughter. The incident in the alley was an isolated response to witnessing a crime, not an indication of ongoing involvement in security operations. Is that accurate? That's accurate. And you represent no security threat to the United States or its interests? Correct. And you have no intention of returning to security work or using your background in any capacity that would create intelligence concerns? Ryan hesitated, thinking about Ava's job offer. I have no intention of doing anything that would create intelligence concerns. If someone asked me to consult on security systems or training in a purely domestic legal capacity, I might consider it. But I'm not going to work for foreign governments, criminal organizations, or anyone else who would put me at odds with U.S. interests. Whitmore typed a final note and closed his tablet. Good enough. My report will reflect that we conducted due diligence, found no security concerns, and recommend closing the inquiry without further investigation. You should be aware that this conversation is now part of your file, so if you do something in the future that raises flags again, it'll be viewed in context of what you've told me today. Understood. One more thing. Whitmore pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. If your situation changes, if someone from your past creates problems, if foreign actors take an interest in you, if anything happens that could be relevant to national security, I want you to call me. Not as a threat, but as an offer. You have skills and experience that could be valuable if things go sideways. Better to have a relationship established before crisis hits. Ryan pocketed the card without looking at it. Hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully. Whitmore stood and extended his hand again. Mr. Cole, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing in that alley. Most people would have walked past. The fact that you didn't says something about your character. But I'd suggest you try to stay out of viral videos going forward. Makes life complicated. Trust me, that's the plan. After Whitmore left, Ryan sat at the table for another 10 minutes, letting the adrenaline drain from his system. It was done. He'd given them enough to satisfy bureaucratic requirements without revealing anything actionable. Whitmore would file his report, the inquiry would be closed, and Ryan could go back to being invisible, assuming the media lost interest, assuming no one else decided to dig, assuming the universe decided to give him a break for once. He called Ava from the sidewalk outside the coffee shop. It's done. He got what he needed. I didn't say anything that creates new problems, and he's filing a report that recommends closing the inquiry. That's excellent. Better than I hoped. How do you feel? Exhausted, relieved, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's not going to be another shoe, Ryan. We controlled the narrative, managed the investigation, and protected your privacy. The worst is over. Is it? Because the video is still out there. People are still curious. And I'm still living in an apartment with my face on the internet where millions of people can see it. Ava was quiet for a moment. You're right. The exposure doesn't go away completely, but it fades. In 2 weeks, there will be some new viral video and people will forget about you. In a month, you'll just be a footnote in the great internet archive of things that briefly mattered. You just have to survive the next few weeks while the attention dies down. And if it doesn't die down, then we adapt. But Ryan, I meant what I said yesterday. The job offer is real. If you decide that construction isn't sustainable anymore, that you need a change, come work for me. Design security systems, train my people, consult on risk assessment, work from home, set your own hours, make enough money that Lucy can go to private school, and you can stop worrying about making rent. It would be good for both of us. Ryan leaned against the building, watching traffic flow past like a river of metal and glass. The offer was tempting. More than tempting. It would solve so many problems: financial security, meaningful work that used his actual skills, the ability to provide Lucy with opportunities he couldn't afford on a construction worker's salary. But it also meant staying connected to that world, to people who knew what he used to be, to the possibility that his past would always be hovering just beneath the surface of his present. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. The offer doesn't expire. After they hung up, Ryan started walking. He had hours before he needed to pick up Lucy, and the thought of going back to his empty apartment felt suffocating. So he walked through downtown Seattle, past the tourists at Pike Place Market, and the business people hurrying to meetings, past street performers and coffee shops, and all the ordinary chaos of a city at midday. He was just another face in the crowd, anonymous and unremarkable, and for the first time in days, that felt like a gift. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he opened it. "Mr. Cole, this is Sarah Chen from Seattle Times. Your interview is running in tomorrow's paper, front page of the local section. I wanted you to know that I wrote it as sympathetically as I could while maintaining journalistic integrity. You came across as honest and principled. I think it'll help with public perception. The piece focuses on your choice to leave security work for fatherhood, emphasizes your desire for privacy, and makes it clear that you're just a regular guy who responded to an emergency. No conspiracy theories, no speculation about hidden agendas. I hope it gives you some peace. Take care of your daughter." Ryan read the text twice, feeling something in his chest loosen. Sarah Chen had kept her word. She'd written the story he'd given her rather than the story that would get more clicks. In a world of Derek Marshes who'd weaponize an 8-year-old for career advancement, finding a journalist with integrity felt like stumbling onto an oasis in the desert. He texted back, "Thank you, genuinely. You didn't have to be fair, but you were. I appreciate it more than I can say." Her response came a minute later. "That's what journalism is supposed to be. Good luck with everything." Ryan pocketed his phone and kept walking, and for the first time since that night in the alley, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the chaos of the past 72 hours. Ryan picked up Lucy at 3 o'clock sharp, and her face lit up when she saw him waiting at the school gate like he'd promised. They got ice cream, 2 scoops each because they'd earned it, and then pizza from their favorite place that had arcade games in the back. Lucy beat him at air hockey 3 games in a row, her competitive streak coming out in full force, and her laughter was the best sound Ryan had heard in weeks. They walked home as the sun started setting, painting the city in shades of gold and amber, and Lucy chattered about her day with the effortless energy of a child who'd already processed and moved past the trauma of yesterday. Kids were resilient that way. They could weather storms that would break adults and emerge ready to play air hockey and argue about pizza toppings. "Daddy?" Lucy said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "Are things going to be normal again now?" Ryan unlocked their door and ushered her inside. "I think so, sweetheart. The attention should start going away soon. People will find something new to talk about." "Good. I liked when we were boring." She dumped her backpack by the door and headed for her room. "I'm going to draw you a picture of us being boring together. It'll have us eating breakfast, and you'll be reading the newspaper, and I'll be coloring, and nothing exciting will be happening at all." "That sounds perfect." While Lucy drew, Ryan checked his email and found a message from Ava's legal team with an attachment, the article Sarah Chen had written, sent as an advance copy before it hit print tomorrow. Ryan opened it with his heart in his throat, scanning the text for anything that might cause new problems. The headline read, "From protector to parent, the man behind the viral video speaks out." Sarah had structured the piece exactly as they'd hoped, opening with the alley incident, quickly pivoting to Ryan's decision to leave security work when he became a father, emphasizing his late wife's influence on his values, and framing his desire for privacy as protecting his daughter rather than hiding secrets. There were quotes from the interview where Ryan sounded thoughtful and principled, explanations of why his background was sparse that made sense without raising new questions, and a closing paragraph that made it clear he just wanted to be left alone to raise Lucy in peace. It was good, really good. The kind of journalism that told a complete story without exploitation, that satisfied curiosity without feeding speculation. Sarah had done exactly what she'd promised, and Ryan felt a wave of gratitude so intense it was almost overwhelming. He forwarded the article to Ava with a simple message. "This should help. Thank you for setting it up." Her response came immediately. "Told you Sarah was the right choice. This closes the loop. The public gets their story, you get your privacy back, everyone wins. Breathe, Ryan. You did it." That night, after Lucy was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ryan stood at his window looking out at the city lights and allowed himself to feel the full weight of the past few days. He'd been afraid, truly deeply afraid in a way he hadn't experienced since the early days after Emma's death, When he'd realized he was responsible for keeping another human being alive and had no idea if he was capable of it. The fear of exposure, of losing Lucy, of having his past destroy his present, had been paralyzing. But he'd survived. With help, more help than he'd wanted to need, but he'd survived. And maybe that was the lesson here, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that accepting support didn't mean surrendering independence, that people like Ava, who remembered what he'd done for them, were willing to return the favor when he needed it most. His phone rang, and he was surprised to see it was Marcus calling. "Mr. Cole, just wanted to give you a heads up. I've been monitoring the building all day, and there were only 2 media approaches, both photographers who left when I asked them to. It's died down significantly. I think the story is losing momentum." "That's good news. Thank you for staying on it. Ms. Lang has asked me to maintain surveillance for another 48 hours just to be safe. But honestly, I think the worst is over. People are already moving on to the next thing. That's how the internet works. Short attention span, always chasing the newest outrage or curiosity. I hope you're right." "I usually am. Get some rest, Mr. Cole. You look like you need it." After Marcus hung up, Ryan realized he was smiling. A real smile, not the careful ones he'd been performing for days. Maybe it really was over. Maybe the universe was finally giving him a break. He went to bed early and slept deeply for the first time in a week. No nightmares, no anxiety, just the blessed oblivion of exhaustion finally catching up with him. When he woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through his window, and Lucy was already up, sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal and reading the back of the box like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Morning, Daddy. You snored last night, like a bear." "I did not." "Did too. Mrs. Chen probably heard you through the walls." Ryan laughed and ruffled her hair, earning an indignant protest. He made coffee and toast, and they ate breakfast together in comfortable silence, just another Thursday morning in the life of a construction worker and his daughter. Ordinary. Unremarkable. Exactly what he'd been fighting to preserve. His phone buzzed with a text from his foreman. "Heard you became internet famous. You coming back to work, or are you too good for us now?" Ryan texted back, "See you Monday, and I'm buying lunch to make up for the drama." "Damn right you are. Welcome back." It felt good, like pieces clicking back into place, like his life returning to its proper shape after being bent out of form by circumstances beyond his control. Ryan dropped Lucy at school. No reporters, no cameras, just the normal chaos of parents and kids and backpacks, and then headed to the public library because he couldn't face going home to an empty apartment, and he wasn't due back at work until Monday. The library was quiet, filled with the kind of people who went to libraries on Thursday mornings. Retirees reading newspapers, college students studying, a few homeless folks taking advantage of the free Wi-Fi and climate control. Ryan found a corner table and opened his laptop, intending to catch up on job listings and maybe do some research on better schools for Lucy, but instead found himself searching for articles about the alley incident. Sarah Chen's piece had been picked up by several outlets, and the narrative had shifted exactly as they'd hoped. The headlines now read, "Hero Dad Sought Privacy After Viral Fame," and "Construction Worker Explained Security Background," rather than the conspiracy-laden speculation from earlier in the week. The comment sections were still toxic in that way. Internet comment sections always were. But the mainstream conversation had moved on. There was already a new viral video making the rounds, something about a dog saving a kid from a pool. And Ryan's moment of infamy was fading into the great archive of things that briefly captured collective attention before being displaced by the next shiny object. He was reading through one of the more sympathetic articles when a shadow fell across his table. Ryan looked up and felt his stomach drop. Sophie Lang stood there, looking nervous and younger than her years, wearing jeans and a sweater that suggested she'd dressed for comfort rather than style. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd been crying recently, or sleeping poorly, or both. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "I'm sorry to ambush you like this. Ava told me where you might be. I needed to thank you, properly, not in a dark alley when I was in shock, but now, when I can actually process what you did for me." Ryan closed his laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. "You didn't need to track me down. but sit if you want." Sophie sat, her hands clutching a coffee cup like it was an anchor. "I haven't been okay since that night. I keep reliving it, keep seeing their faces, keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. My therapist says it's PTSD, that it's normal after trauma, but it doesn't feel normal. It feels like I'm broken." "You're not broken," Ryan said gently. "You're processing something terrible that happened to you. That's not weakness. That's your mind trying to make sense of an experience that doesn't make sense. But you're not broken. You went through it too, and you seem fine." "I'm not fine, I'm just practiced at looking fine. There's a difference." Ryan softened his voice. "Sophie, I spent years being exposed to violence, and it messed me up in ways I'm still discovering. The fact that I can function after traumatic situations doesn't mean I'm handling them well. It just means I've built enough scar tissue that the wounds don't show as clearly." Sophie wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Ava told me you used to work for our family, that you were our protection when we were kids. I barely remember you, just this tall man who was always there but never talked much. You made me feel safe even when I didn't understand why I needed protecting. You were a good kid. Both of you were. Made my job easy. And then you left because you wanted a normal life, because you met someone you loved and wanted to be more than just a guardian for other people's families. Ava told me that too." Sophie's voice cracked. "And now you have this beautiful daughter, and you're building a good life, and I ruined it by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The whole world knows about you now because you saved me. I'm so sorry." Ryan reached across the table and put his hand over hers, the gesture paternal and reassuring. "Sophie, listen to me. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You didn't ruin anything. You were a victim of bad people making bad choices, and I did what anyone should have done. If there's blame to be assigned, it goes to the men who attacked you, not to you for being attacked. But your privacy is being managed. The attention is already fading. By next week, I'll be anonymous again. And even if I wasn't, it would still be worth it, because you're safe. That matters more than my convenience." Sophie was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to carry this, the fear, the guilt, the gratitude, all mixed together. It's too much." "I know, but you don't have to carry it alone. You've got Ava, you've got your therapist, and if you ever need to talk to someone who understands violence from both sides, you have my number. Ava can give it to you. I'm not going to disappear again. If you need me, I'm here." They sat in silence for a while, Sophie working through her tears, Ryan offering the steady presence he'd learned to provide during his years in protection. Eventually, she calmed enough to drink some of her coffee and attempt a watery smile. "Ava wants to hire you," Sophie said. "She's been talking about it nonstop. Says you're wasted in construction, that you could do so much more." "She mentioned it. I'm thinking about it." "You should say yes. Not because you owe us anything, you don't, but because having you back in our lives, even just as a consultant, would make me feel safer. Is that selfish?" "No, it's human. We all want to be around people who make us feel protected." Ryan paused. "Can I ask you something? Why were you alone in that alley? Where was your security?" Sophie looked down at her coffee. "I don't have security anymore. I'm 27, I'm an adult, and I got tired of being watched all the time. So I told Ava I didn't need protection, that I could take care of myself, that I wanted to live like a normal person without bodyguards following me around. I was stupid." "You weren't stupid. You were optimistic. That's different." "My optimism almost got me raped or killed." "No. Two men's decision to attack someone almost got you hurt. Your optimism just meant you were vulnerable when they made that choice. But Sophie, you can't live your whole life behind walls because bad people exist. That's not living. That's just surviving. How do I find the balance between being safe and being free?" Ryan thought about this, about all the years he'd spent managing that exact tension for other people. You assess risks honestly without letting fear make you paranoid. You take reasonable precautions without letting them control your life. And you stay connected to people who care about you, so you're never truly alone even when you're physically by yourself. That's the best anyone can do. Sophie finished her coffee and stood, her composure somewhat restored. "Thank you for saving me, for talking to me, for not making me feel stupid or weak. Ava's right about you. You're exactly what she remembers. The guardian who understood that protecting people meant more than just keeping them alive." After she left, Ryan sat at his library table and felt the weight of responsibility settling back onto his shoulders. He thought he was done with this, done being the person people turned to for protection, done carrying the burden of other people's safety. But apparently, that identity wasn't something he could simply shed like an old coat. It was woven into who he was, and even 3 years of construction work hadn't changed that fundamental truth. His phone buzzed. Ava, again. Sophie found you. I hope that was okay. She needed closure. It was fine. She's struggling. I know. We're getting her the best help available, but trauma doesn't operate on a convenient timeline. She'll heal when she heals. A pause. Ryan, I have to ask directly because dancing around it feels dishonest. Will you come work for me? I'm not asking you to go back into the field or do anything dangerous. I'm asking you to help me build security systems and train my people so that what happened to Sophie doesn't happen to anyone else on my watch. It's a legitimate position with a legitimate salary, and you'd be helping people by preventing rather than responding to threats. Please think about it seriously. Ryan looked around the library, at the ordinary people living ordinary lives, at the peaceful anonymity he'd fought so hard to achieve and maintain. And then he thought about Lucy growing up with more opportunities, better schools, the kind of security that came from financial stability rather than living paycheck to paycheck. He thought about Sophie's red-rimmed eyes and the way his presence had helped her process trauma. He thought about Ava and the promise he'd made 15 years ago to protect what mattered. I'll do it, he heard himself say. On 3 conditions. 1, I work primarily from home so I can still be present for Lucy. 2, my daughter's privacy is protected absolutely. No connection between her and Lang Industries that could make her a target. 3, if I ever feel like the work is pulling me back into the person I used to be instead of forward into the person I want to become, I can walk away with no hard feelings. Agreed on all counts. When can you start? Let me finish out my 2 weeks' notice at the construction site. I owe my foreman that much. Then I'm yours. Thank you, Ryan, truly. This means more to me than you know. After they hung up, Ryan sat in the quiet library and wondered if he'd just made the best decision of his life or the worst. Time would tell. It always did. But for now, he had a daughter to pick up from school and a pizza tradition to maintain and a life that was still standing despite everything that had tried to knock it down. He packed up his laptop and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. And for the first time in years, Ryan Cole allowed himself to believe that maybe reinvention wasn't about becoming someone completely different. Maybe it was about finding ways to be who you were while protecting the things that mattered most. Maybe the guardian and the father weren't separate identities at all, just different expressions of the same fundamental need to keep people safe. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Lucy's school. Mr. Cole, Lucy's teacher wanted us to pass along that Lucy drew a beautiful picture in art class today titled My Hero Daddy. She's very proud of it and can't wait to show you. Thought you'd like to know. Ryan smiled, genuine and unguarded, and started walking toward the school. He was early, but that was okay. Some things were worth being early for. 3 weeks later, Ryan stood in his apartment surrounded by boxes that represented the careful dismantling of one life and the construction of another. Not the desperate kind of packing that came from running away, but the methodical sort that came from moving forward with intention. Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapping her stuffed animals in newspaper like they were fragile treasures, humming that song from the Princess movie while she worked. They weren't leaving Seattle. That had been Lucy's one non-negotiable demand when Ryan told her about the new job and the changes it would bring. She had friends here, a school she loved, memories of her mother woven into the streets and parks, and the apartment where they'd become a family of 2 instead of 3. So instead of fleeing to somewhere anonymous, they were moving across town to a better neighborhood with better schools and a 2-bedroom apartment that had actual closet space and windows that didn't stick. It was a compromise Ryan could live with. Growth instead of escape. His last day at the construction site had been surprisingly emotional. The crew had thrown him an impromptu going-away lunch, complete with a cake that read "Good Luck, Batman" in crooked frosting letters, which made Ryan laugh despite himself. His foreman, a gruff man named Eddie who rarely showed affection, had pulled him aside afterward. "You're making the right call," Eddie had said, gripping Ryan's shoulder with a calloused hand. "Construction is honest work, but it ain't work for a man with your skills. I always knew you were overqualified for hauling lumber and hammering nails. Wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, it's going to be better than this." "This was good for me when I needed it," Ryan had replied. "Kept me grounded, kept me present. And now you need something different. That's life, brother. We change or we die. You go be something better." The memory of that conversation sat warm in Ryan's chest as he taped up another box. Eddie was right. He was changing, but not into someone unrecognizable. He was becoming an evolution of who he'd always been. The guardian, the protector, just operating from a different angle now. Instead of standing between threats and the people he protected, he'd be building systems that prevented threats from getting close in the first place. It was proactive rather than reactive, design rather than response. And it meant he could do it from home, with Lucy safe in the next room doing homework while he worked. Ava had been true to her word about every condition. The employment contract that arrived via courier was exactly what they'd discussed. Generous salary, flexible hours, work from home primary arrangement with occasional on-site consultations, and ironclad privacy protections for his family. There was even a clause that allowed him to walk away with 6 months severance and a non-disparagement agreement if he ever felt the work was compromising his values or his role as a father. David had reviewed every word before Ryan signed, and even the lawyer had admitted it was the most employee-friendly contract he'd seen in 20 years of practice. "She really wants you," David had said, "and she's willing to structure the entire arrangement around your needs to get you. That's not common in the corporate world." "Ava understands what it means to be protected by someone who cares," Ryan had replied. "She's returning the favor." The viral video had faded exactly as everyone predicted. By week 2, the view count had plateaued around 12 million, and the conversation had moved on to other curiosities and outrages. Sarah Chen's article had accomplished exactly what it was designed to do: provide a satisfying narrative that closed the story, rather than opening new chapters. The conspiracy theorists still muttered in their corners of the internet about government cover-ups and hidden identities, but they were background noise, easily ignored. Most people had accepted the official story: former security professional, devoted single father, ordinary hero, case closed. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "I am making dumplings tonight. You and Lucy should come eat before you move tomorrow. Consider it goodbye dinner from your favorite neighbor." Ryan smiled and texted back his acceptance. Mrs. Chen had been quietly heartbroken when he'd told her they were moving, though she'd hidden it behind pragmatic observations about the new place being closer to better schools and safer streets. But her eyes had been wet when she'd hugged Lucy and told her to visit often. "I will, I promise," Lucy had said with the earnest certainty of a child who believed promises lasted forever. "You can teach me to make dumplings so Daddy doesn't have to buy the frozen ones anymore." "The frozen ones are fine," Ryan had protested. "The frozen ones are garbage," Mrs. Chen had said firmly. "You come every Sunday for cooking lessons until this child knows how to feed herself properly. That is not negotiable." So Sunday dinners with Mrs. Chen had become part of their new routine before the routine had even officially started. It was a thread connecting their old life to their new one, ensuring that the transition didn't mean abandonment of the people and places that had sheltered them when shelter was needed most. Lucy looked up from her newspaper-wrapped menagerie. "Daddy, will we have enough room for all my stuffed animals in the new place?" "You'll have your own room that's bigger than the one you have now. Plenty of space for the zoo." "What about you? Will your room be bigger too?" "A little, but mostly I'll have an office where I can work, so I'm not always at the kitchen table with my laptop." Lucy considered this, her face scrunching up the way it did when she was processing something complex. "Is this job going to change you? Make you different?" Ryan stopped packing and sat down next to her, recognizing the real question underneath the surface one. "I'm going to be doing different work, but I'm still going to be your dad. Still going to make you breakfast and help with homework and watch movies with you. The job is just how I earn money to take care of us. It doesn't change who I am to you." "But what if you have to travel? What if you have to go protect people far away?" "That's not what this job is. I'm designing security systems and training people who do protection work. I'll do most of it from home, and when I occasionally have to go to Ava's office, it'll just be for the day. I'll always be home by the time you get back from school." "That's a promise." Lucy nodded slowly, and Ryan could see her working through the anxiety that came from being 8 years old and having already lost one parent. Change was terrifying when you'd learned that change could mean people disappearing forever. "Can I meet Ava?" Lucy asked suddenly. "You keep talking about her and I want to know who she is. Is that weird?" "It's not weird at all. I'll ask her if she'd like to have lunch with us before we move. Would you like that?" "Yes, because if you're going to work for her, I want to make sure she's nice to you. You work really hard and you deserve someone who's nice." Ryan pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness in her voice. She was 8 years old and already trying to shield him from the world, just as he'd spent her entire life trying to shield her. "You're the best kid, you know that?" "I know. You tell me all the time." That evening, they walked to Mrs. Chen's apartment and were greeted by the smell of ginger and garlic and something frying that made Ryan's stomach growl, despite his best efforts at dignity. Mrs. Chen had gone all out. Not just dumplings, but an entire feast spread across her small table. More food than 3 people could reasonably eat, but exactly the right amount to communicate how much she cared. They ate and talked and laughed, Lucy telling stories about school, while Mrs. Chen pretended to be scandalized by the antics of 8-year-olds. After dinner, while Lucy was distracted by a Chinese cartoon on Mrs. Chen's television, the elderly woman pulled Ryan into her tiny kitchen under the pretense of making tea. "You are doing the right thing," she said quietly, her weathered hands moving through the familiar ritual of heating water and preparing cups. Moving up, moving forward. Emma would be proud. Ryan felt his throat tighten at the mention of his late wife. Mrs. Chen was one of the few people who'd known Emma, who'd attended the funeral, who understood what her loss had meant. "I hope so. Sometimes I worry I'm making choices she wouldn't approve of. Emma loved you because you protected people. That is who you are, in your bones. This new job, it is the same thing, yes? Just different method. She would understand. She'd also worry that I was getting pulled back into the life I left behind." Mrs. Chen turned to face him, her dark eyes sharp with the wisdom of 7 decades lived through war and migration and loss. "You are not going back. You are going forward in a direction that honors who you were while protecting who you have become. That is not the same thing. Do not confuse motion with regression, Ryan. You are not running toward your past. You are walking toward your future with the tools your past gave you. Big difference." The distinction settled something in Ryan's chest that had been restless for weeks. Mrs. Chen was right. He wasn't becoming the man he'd been 15 years ago. He was becoming someone new who integrated all his experiences: the guardian, the husband, the father, the protector who'd learned that prevention was better than intervention. It was synthesis, not regression. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. For taking care of Lucy, for being our family when we needed one, for not judging me when my past became public. Family does not judge. Family just loves and helps and makes dumplings." She pressed a container into his hands. "For your journey tomorrow. Eat them cold if you must, but better if you steam them first." The next morning arrived gray and drizzly. Typical Seattle weather that felt appropriate for endings and beginnings happening simultaneously. The moving truck was smaller than Ryan expected, a reminder that they'd accumulated less than he'd thought over the past 3 years. The furniture was mostly second-hand, the dishes were mismatched, the television was ancient, but every item represented survival and rebuilding, and he was grateful for all of it. Marcus showed up to help with the heavy lifting, along with 2 other security personnel from Lang Industries that Ava had insisted on sending. They worked efficiently and carefully, treating Lucy's boxes of toys with the same respect they gave Ryan's furniture, and within 3 hours, the apartment was empty except for memories and dust bunnies. Lucy stood in the middle of the vacant living room, her voice small and uncertain. "It looks so different without our stuff, like we were never here." Ryan knelt beside her. "We were here. This is where we became a team, where we figured out how to be a family of 2. That doesn't disappear just because we're moving forward. But what if I forget? What if I forget what it was like when Mom was alive and we were happy?" "You won't forget, sweetheart. I promise. And if you ever need help remembering, we'll look at pictures and tell stories and keep her alive in the ways that matter. Memories don't live in apartments. They live in us. Lucy nodded, though tears were streaming down her face. Ryan held her while she cried, letting her mourn the loss of familiar walls and the security that came from the known, even when the known was cramped and imperfect. Change was hard, growth hurt, but staying frozen in place hurt worse. The new apartment was in a neighborhood called Maple Leaf, tree-lined streets and well-maintained buildings, and the kind of quiet that came from having adequate police presence and community investment. Ryan had chosen it specifically because the elementary school was excellent, and the streets felt safe, and Lucy could walk to a park that had actual playground equipment instead of broken swings and graffiti. Their building had a secured entrance and an elevator that actually worked, luxuries they hadn't had before. Their unit was on the third floor with windows that faced east, which meant morning light and a view of the neighborhood instead of a brick wall. Lucy ran from room to room when they first entered, her tears forgotten in the excitement of exploration. "Daddy, my room has a window seat and a closet I can actually walk into, and the walls are blue." "I had them paint it your favorite color. Surprise." Lucy emerged from her room with a grin that made every stressful moment of the past month worthwhile. "This is the best room I've ever had. Can we set up my bed first? I want to test the window seat immediately." They spent the afternoon unpacking with help from Marcus and his team, and by evening, the apartment had started to feel like home. The furniture looked better in these rooms with higher ceilings and better light. Lucy's drawings went up on the refrigerator in the kitchen that had counter space and appliances made in this century. Ryan's small collection of books found shelf space in what would be his office, along with his laptop and the equipment Ava's company had provided for his remote work setup. After the moving help left and pizza had been consumed and Lucy was finally asleep in her new room with her stuffed animals arranged protectively around her, Ryan stood at the window of his living room and looked out at his new neighborhood. This was their fresh start, their reward for surviving, the tangible proof that life could improve if you were willing to accept help and make hard choices and trust that forward motion was possible even after devastating loss. His phone rang. "Ava, how's the new place?" "Good, really good. Lucy's in love with her room, and I think we're going to be happy here." "I'm glad." "And Ryan, I wanted to let you know that your official start date is Monday, but there's no pressure to hit the ground running. Take the week to settle in, make sure Lucy's adjusted to her new school, get your office set up. The work will wait." "I appreciate that, but I'm actually looking forward to starting. It's been a long time since I did work that felt meaningful beyond just paying bills. It's going to be good work, Ryan. Important work. And you're going to be excellent at it." She paused. "Also, Lucy asked to meet me. Would you and she like to have lunch this weekend? Somewhere casual, nothing formal, just the three of us so she can satisfy her curiosity about the woman her father is working for." Ryan smiled. Of course, Ava had already arranged it. She was always 3 steps ahead, anticipating needs before they were articulated. "Saturday? There's a place near here that Lucy loves, makes decent burgers. Text me the address. I'll see you both at noon." Saturday came with unexpected sunshine, the kind of perfect autumn day that made Seattle residents forget about the 9 months of gray they'd endure before the next one arrived. Ryan and Lucy walked to the restaurant, taking their time to explore the new neighborhood, noting which houses had dogs in the yard and which streets had the best trees for climbing and which corner store sold the good candy. Ava was already waiting when they arrived, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire, looking younger and more approachable than she had in their previous meetings. She stood when she saw them, and Ryan watched as Lucy studied her with the careful assessment of a child trying to determine if an adult was trustworthy. "You must be Lucy," Ava said, extending her hand. "Your father has told me you're an excellent artist and a fierce air hockey champion." Lucy shook her hand solemnly. "He talks about you too. He says you're smart and you help people and you make good decisions." "I try. Although sometimes I need help from people who know more than I do. That's why I'm so grateful your father agreed to work with me." They settled into a booth, Lucy between Ryan and the wall in the protective positioning that had become automatic for him, and ordered burgers and fries and milkshakes. The conversation flowed more easily than Ryan expected, Ava asking Lucy about school and her favorite subjects, Lucy asking Ava about running a company and whether it was hard being the boss. "Sometimes," Ava admitted. The hardest part is making decisions that affect lots of people and knowing that even when you choose carefully, someone might get hurt or disappointed. But your father taught me something important when I was younger, that protecting people means accepting responsibility for hard choices and living with the consequences. Lucy tilted her head, considering this. Did you know my dad when he was a protector? Before he was a construction worker? I did. He protected my family for many years. He was the best at what he did. Not just because he was skilled, but because he genuinely cared about keeping people safe. That's rare. Most people in that line of work are just doing a job. Your father was doing a calling. What's the difference? A job is something you do for money. A calling is something you do even if no one paid you, because it's part of who you are. Your father would protect people even if protecting people didn't earn him anything, because that's his nature. It's like asking a bird not to fly. Some things are just intrinsic. Lucy nodded slowly, processing this, and then fixed Ava with a look that was far too serious for an 8-year-old. Are you going to be nice to him? Because he works really hard and he's really good at being a dad, and I don't want him to have a mean boss. Ava's expression softened, and Ryan saw genuine emotion flicker across her face. Lucy, I promise you that I will never ask your father to do anything that compromises his values or takes him away from you. He's not just an employee to me. He's family. And family takes care of each other. Okay, but if you're mean to him, I'm going to be really disappointed in you. That's fair. I'll do my best to live up to your standards. After lunch, they walked through the neighborhood park, Lucy running ahead to the playground while Ryan and Ava followed at a more sedate pace. The autumn leaves were beginning their transformation, painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter wasn't far behind. She's remarkable, Ava said quietly. Emma would be so proud of who she's becoming. Most of that is Emma's influence. All the good parts of her personality came from her mother. The stubbornness and the questions and the fierce loyalty, that's all Emma. And the protective instinct? The way she watches you to make sure you're okay, that's you. She's learning from the best. They sat on a bench near the playground, watching Lucy conquer the monkey bars with determined concentration. Ryan felt the weight of the past few weeks settling into something manageable. No longer the crushing pressure of crisis, but the ordinary burden of life moving forward. I never thanked you properly, he said, for everything you did. The legal help, the media management, the calls to make Whitmore back off. I would have lost everything without your intervention. You saved my sister's life. You saved both our lives, really. Sophie physically that night, me emotionally by showing me that the man I remembered was still out there, still protecting people, still being exactly who I needed him to be. I couldn't let the world punish you for being good. That wouldn't have been right. Still, I owe you more than I can repay. Ava turned to face him. Ryan, you don't owe me anything. But if you insist on keeping a ledger, then pay it forward. Protect the people who work for my company the way you protected Sophie and me. Design systems that keep them safe. Train our security team to be as good as you were. Make sure that what happened to Sophie doesn't happen to anyone else on my watch. That's payment enough. I can do that. I know. That's why I hired you. Lucy ran over, breathless and pink-cheeked from her playground conquest. Ava, come see how high I can swing. It's really high. Daddy gets nervous when I go this high. I do not get nervous, Ryan protested. You make that face where your jaw gets tight and you look like you're going to have a heart attack. That's just my normal face. No, it's your worried face. Come on, both of you. Watch me swing. They spent another hour at the playground, Ava proving surprisingly adept at pushing Lucy on the swings and catching her at the bottom of the slide. Ryan watched them together and felt something click into place, the recognition that his family had grown beyond just him and Lucy. Mrs. Chen had been their family for 3 years. Now Ava and Sophie were part of that circle too, connected by shared history and mutual protection and the kind of bonds that formed when people showed up for each other during the hardest moments. As the sun started to set and they walked back toward the restaurant where Ava had parked, Lucy reached up and took Ava's hand on one side and Ryan's on the other, swinging between them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ryan caught Ava's eye over Lucy's head and saw the same thought reflected back. This was what protection actually meant. Not just preventing physical harm, but creating space for people to be vulnerable and joyful and connected. Not just standing between threats and targets, but building communities where people could flourish without fear. Monday morning arrived with nervous anticipation, Ryan's first official day with Lang Industries. He'd set up his home office over the weekend, and now he sat at his new desk with his company laptop open, waiting for the video call that would kick off his orientation. Lucy had already left for school, accompanied by Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on handling first-day duties at the new school to help with the transition. The video call connected, and suddenly Ryan was looking at a grid of faces. Ava in her office, David from legal, Jennifer from media relations, and several people he didn't recognize who introduced themselves as heads of various security divisions within the company. They spent 2 hours walking him through current protocols, existing vulnerabilities, and the projects they hoped he'd tackle first. It was good work, meaningful work, the kind of thing that engaged his tactical mind without requiring him to put his body in danger. He found himself asking questions, making suggestions, seeing patterns and weaknesses that others had missed because they didn't have his particular combination of experience and perspective. By the time the call ended, Ryan felt energized in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Over the following weeks, he settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for Lucy, breakfast together, walking her to school, being present for the small rituals that made her feel secure. Then work until mid-afternoon, designing security protocols, reviewing threat assessments, conducting virtual training sessions with Lang Industries' security team. He'd break to pick up Lucy from school, help with homework, make dinner, and be present for the evening routine. After she went to bed, he'd sometimes return to work if a project required extra attention, but never at the cost of sleep or the following morning's breakfast ritual. It was balance, real balance. Not the performative kind where people claimed to have it all figured out, but the messy, imperfect kind where some days worked better than others, and the goal was progress rather than perfection. 6 weeks into his new position, Ryan received an invitation to the Lang Industries holiday party. It was optional for remote employees, but Ava had added a handwritten note. "I'd really like you to come. It would mean a lot to the team to meet you in person, plus Lucy is invited, and there will be excellent desserts." Ryan showed Lucy the invitation that evening over dinner. "What do you think? Want to get dressed up and meet the people I work with?" Lucy's face lit up. "Will there be dancing? I like parties with dancing." "I don't know about dancing, but there will definitely be desserts." "Then yes, absolutely yes, we need to go shopping for a fancy dress." The party was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, elegantly decorated but not ostentatious, the kind of event that reflected Ava's taste, sophisticated without being stuffy. Ryan wore a suit he'd purchased for the occasion, and Lucy wore a navy blue dress she'd chosen herself, complete with sparkly shoes that she'd insisted were fancy but practical for dancing. They arrived fashionably late, Ryan's instinct to scan the room for exits and potential threats kicking in automatically before he consciously reminded himself that this was a corporate party, not a hostile environment. Though old habits were hard to break, and there was something comforting about knowing where every door was. Ava spotted them immediately and made her way through the crowd, Sophie trailing behind her. Both sisters looked radiant and relaxed, so different from that night in the alley that it seemed impossible they were the same people. Sophie especially had transformed. The haunted look in her eyes had faded, replaced by cautious confidence, and when she smiled at Ryan, it reached her eyes. "You came," Ava said, hugging Lucy first and then Ryan. "I wasn't sure you would." "You promised excellent desserts. I'm a man of priorities." "And dancing," Lucy added. "I was promised there might be dancing." "There is absolutely dancing," Sophie said, extending her hand to Lucy. "Come on, I'll show you where the dance floor is. Fair warning, though, I'm a terrible dancer." "That's okay. Daddy's worse." "Hey," Ryan protested, but Lucy and Sophie were already gone, leaving him with Ava at the edge of the ballroom. "She's doing better," Ryan observed, watching Sophie guide Lucy through the crowd with the careful attentiveness of someone who understood how precious children were. "She is. Therapy is helping. So is knowing that you're designing systems to protect our employees and contractors. She said it makes her feel like the world is a little bit safer, knowing you're out there, making it harder for bad people to hurt good ones." "That's a lot of faith to put in one person's work." "You've earned it. The protocols you've designed in 6 weeks are better than what we developed over 5 years. You see things other people miss. It's your gift." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party unfold. Employees laughing and dancing and celebrating a successful year, their safety and security invisible but present in the background. That was the work now. Not the visible heroics that got filmed and went viral, but the quiet competence that prevented situations from becoming crises in the first place. "I've been thinking about that night," Ava said quietly. "The alley. How random it was. How easily it could have ended differently. And I realized something. You didn't save Sophie that night. You'd already saved her 15 years ago by teaching her to be brave enough to live freely. You just protected the life you'd made possible. That's what guardians do. They create space for people to flourish, and then they maintain that space." Ryan considered this. "I never thought about it that way." "You should, because that's what you're doing now in this job. You're creating space for 3,000 people to do their work without fear. That's not less important than physical protection. It's more important because it's sustainable." The evening progressed with surprising ease. Ryan met his colleagues in person, people he'd only known through video calls and email, who greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. Several of them thanked him for specific protocol changes that had made their jobs easier or safer. One woman from the Seattle office pulled him aside to explain how his recommended changes to their parking garage security had prevented what could have been a serious assault the week before. "The new lighting, the camera placement, the panic buttons, all your suggestions. A guy followed one of our employees from her car, but she hit the panic button and security was there in 30 seconds. He ran. She was shaken, but unharmed. That wouldn't have been possible with our old system." Ryan absorbed this, feeling the weight of impact. "I'm glad it worked. That's exactly what it was designed to do. It saved her. Maybe saved her life. So thank you. On behalf of all of us who work late and walk to our cars alone, thank you for caring enough to think about our safety." After she walked away, Ryan stood at the edge of the dance floor and watched Lucy spinning with Sophie, both of them laughing as they attempted moves that were more enthusiasm than skill. His daughter looked happy. Truly, unreservedly happy in a way she hadn't been since before Emma died. And he realized that this, building a life where Lucy could be joyful and safe, where his work protected people without requiring him to sacrifice his presence in his daughter's life. This was the future Emma had wanted for them. He'd spent 3 years believing that becoming someone different meant abandoning everything he'd been. But that was wrong. Integration, not abandonment. Using his skills for good without letting them consume him. Being the guardian and the father simultaneously, not sequentially. That was the lesson he'd been too stubborn to learn until circumstances forced his hand. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen with a photo attached. She'd taken a picture of the drawing Lucy had made at school, the one titled "My Hero Daddy." It showed a stick figure, man with a cape, standing between two smaller stick figures and a scribbled dark shape labeled "Bad Stuff." The man's cape was decorated with stars, and above the scene, Lucy had written in uneven letters, "My daddy protects people because he's good at it, and he loves us." Ryan stared at the image until his vision blurred, overwhelmed by the simple clarity of a child's understanding. She got it. Despite all his worries about what the viral video might teach her, despite his fears that she'd see violence and think it was acceptable, she understood the distinction between protection and aggression. She understood that his actions came from love, not anger. She understood him. Ava appeared at his elbow, following his gaze to where Lucy and Sophie were now attempting to teach a group of executives the choreography from some movie Ryan had never seen. "She's wonderful. You've done an incredible job raising her. I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. That's all any of us can do. Try our best and hope the love carries them through the mistakes." Ava paused. "My father used to say that the measure of protection wasn't preventing all harm. That's impossible. The measure was giving people the tools and the confidence to handle harm when it inevitably came. You've given Lucy that. You've shown her that the world has dangers, but it also has people who stand against those dangers. That's a gift." Ryan pocketed his phone. "Speaking of your father, I've been meaning to ask, what did he think when I left? Did he understand?" "He did. Better than Sophie and I did at the time. He said you'd earned the right to build your own life, that 7 years of service was more than anyone should ask, and that the best guardians knew when to step back so others could grow into their own strength. He was sad to lose you, but he respected the choice. And he was right. We did grow. We learned to protect ourselves. We learned to be brave without you standing behind us. But you still needed protection. Sophie proved that. Sophie proved that even strong people have vulnerable moments. That's human. What matters is that when she needed help, help was available. You were there, Ryan, not as our employee, not as someone obligated by contract, but as someone who saw a person in danger and couldn't walk away. That says more about who you are than any job title ever could. The DJ transitioned to a slower song, and couples began pairing up on the dance floor. Lucy ran over, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, come dance with me. This is the perfect song for dads and daughters." Ryan let himself be pulled onto the dance floor, Lucy's small hands in his, and they swayed to the music while she chattered about the party and the desserts she'd sampled, and how Sophie had promised to teach her about art if Lucy promised to teach her about air hockey. Around them, other parents danced with their children. Other couples moved and practiced rhythms, and the ballroom was full of the sound of people celebrating survival and success and the simple joy of being together. This was what he'd been protecting all along. Not just individual lives, but the possibility of moments like this, ordinary moments that became extraordinary because they represented safety and connection and the freedom to be vulnerable without fear. This was the work. Not the viral video moments that everyone saw, but the quiet accumulation of days where people could laugh and dance and trust that someone was thinking about their security even when they weren't. After the party, Ryan drove home with Lucy dozing in the back seat, exhausted from dancing and sugar and the excitement of being part of her father's professional world. He carried her up to their apartment, tucked her into bed without waking her, and stood in her doorway watching her sleep like he'd done 1,000 times before. "Thank you," he whispered, though whether he was talking to Lucy or Emma or the universe in general, he couldn't say. "Thank you for giving him this chance. Thank you for the people who'd shown up when he needed them. Thank you for the reminder that heroism wasn't about viral videos or public recognition, but about the daily choice to protect and nurture and create space for people to flourish." His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Ava. "Thank you for coming tonight. It meant a lot to everyone to meet the man behind the protocols. You're exactly what this company needed. You're exactly what I hoped you still were. The guardian who understood that protecting people meant more than just keeping them alive. Sleep well, friend. You've earned it." Ryan typed back a simple reply. "Thank you for remembering, and for reminding me who I was meant to be." He set his phone aside and walked to the window, looking out at his neighborhood bathed in streetlight and shadow. Somewhere out there, people were walking home from late shifts, feeling safer because of systems he'd designed. Somewhere, a parent was picking up their child from daycare, protected by protocols he'd implemented. Somewhere, someone was living freely because someone else was thinking about security so they didn't have to. That was the work. That was the calling. And for the first time in 3 years, Ryan Cole felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, protecting exactly the way he was meant to protect. Not in alleys with his fists and his training, though he'd do that again if circumstances demanded it, but in quiet offices and video conferences and careful planning sessions where threats were identified and neutralized before they could materialize. Prevention instead of intervention, design instead of reaction. The Guardian evolved. Emma would have approved. He was certain of that now. She'd wanted him to leave violence behind, but she'd never asked him to stop being a protector. She just wanted him to find gentler methods, sustainable methods, methods that didn't require him to stand in the line of fire. And somehow, through a combination of crisis and grace and Ava's persistent faith, he'd found exactly that. Ryan pulled out Emma's pen, the one she'd given him, the one he still carried every day, and studied the worn eagle on its cap. The original pen, the one Thomas Lang had given him, had been thrown in the Sound 15 years ago as a symbolic severing, but Emma had unknowingly replaced it, creating continuity where he'd tried to create rupture. Maybe that was the lesson. You couldn't truly sever the past. You could only integrate it, honor it, carry it forward in ways that served the present and the future. He set the pen on his desk where he'd see it every morning when he started work, a reminder of who he'd been, who he'd loved, and who he was becoming. The guardian's promise, written in brass and memory, and the daily choice to protect what mattered most. Outside, the city hummed with its late-night rhythms, sirens in the distance, traffic on the main roads, the occasional voice from the street below. All of it felt manageable now. Not safe, because nowhere was truly safe, but protected, watched over, part of a web of people who'd chosen to care about each other's well-being. Ryan checked on Lucy one more time, still sleeping peacefully, her bear tucked under one arm, and then finally allowed himself to go to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new protocols to design, new people to protect. But tonight, he could rest knowing that the guardian's promise had been kept. He'd protected what mattered most, and in protecting it, he'd found his way home.